Chapter 720. Time passed little by little. When it was noon, the smell of meat came from afar. Along with it came another trump card. Some of the injured Tatar cavalrymen were sent back to the center of the battlefield. Brothers, I'm Zhou Xian. I'm sure many of you know me. I was injured by an arrow and couldn't ride a horse, so I was sent to the mercenaries as a captive. A Tatar cavalryman on a horse shouted. Such a shout quickly caused a burst of discussion in the Tatar camp. That person is indeed Zhou Xian. His hometown is not far from mine, so I know him. He is Zhou Xian. He was originally with me. Even if he turned into ashes, I would still recognize him. I just didn't expect that when we left this morning he couldn't get on a horse, but now he can ride a horse. Immediately, several Tatar cavalrymen took the initiative to testify, proving Zhou Xian's true identity. After his identity was confirmed, Zhou Xian's words were more credible. When he talked about his experience, everyone naturally chose to listen carefully. After listening to his story, they also knew what happened to him in the mercenaries. In Zhou Xian's own words, although he was a captive, he was different from a captive. Since he and his injured companions came to the mercenaries, they were immediately surrounded by a group of medical officers called military doctors. Then all kinds of examinations, all kinds of treatment, all kinds of medicine, and all kinds of methods were used. After the treatment, hot meat soup and flatbread were served in front of him. The people who surrounded him were also Mongolian men. Through the conversation he knew that the Mongolian soldiers in front of him were not fake. Through the conversation he gained a deeper understanding of the mercenary army system, and he also gained a deeper understanding of how the soldiers were treated. Zhou Xian was a person who could speak. After he saw that many people were listening to him carefully, he bluntly announced that the treatment of soldiers was soldiers was 10 taels of silver a month. Soldiers were 15 taels of silver a month. The so-called soldiers were the second-line troops with weaker fighting ability. The soldiers were naturally the first-line troops with tyrannical strength. When this treatment was announced, it immediately attracted the attention of the Tatar cavalrymen who were listening carefully. The Tatar cavalrymen were only paid 2 taels of silver a month. Of course, if there was a war, there would still be some extra benefits. For example, they could keep a portion of the things they looted. The military merits they obtained could also be exchanged for a portion of silver taels. But even so, on average, the amount of silver they received each month was still limited. It was far from being as generous as the salary of the mercenaries. Not to mention, according to what Zhou Xian had heard, once the mercenaries were involved in a war, their rewards would only be greater. For example, if you killed an enemy on the battlefield, you could get a reward of 1 to 10 taels of silver. This also depended on who you killed. Hearing this, the Tatar cavalrymen's eyes revealed excitement and even yearning. The cavalry here were all Tatar elites. In terms of combat ability, they were more powerful than the Tatar cavalry at the West River and the North Slope. All capable people were conceded. Things like military exploits were as easy as eating a meal in their hands. Who wouldn't be tempted when they heard that they could receive so many rewards for their military service? The so-called capable people needed a platform to display their abilities, and the mercenary group was obviously a very good platform to display their abilities. It made the hearts of the capable people yearn for it. Speaking of the treatment of the Mongol cavalrymen, although their ability to march and fight was very strong, due to the constraints of the environment, they did not seem to have much creativity other than fighting and hurting. Because of this, their treatment had always been very poor. It was even worse than the Baiming army, the original Nuzan tribe, and the Mongol tribe in Narcissus town. The price they paid was not proportional to the benefits they received. This made many of the Tatar cavalrymen resentful. But when they thought about how everyone was like this on the Mongolian grassland, they slowly balanced out. But balance did not mean that they had truly accepted it. They still wanted to prove themselves and improve their treatment. After all, with money they could do many things. This was something that everyone knew. Why did the Mongol cavalrymen always like to plunder? It would not take long for them to think of attacking the Central Plains. Wasn't it because they were too poor? Everyone knew that the Central Plains was vast with abundant resources. The people there were also very rich. If they did not target them, who else would they target? Although many people would die in every war, compared to the benefits, the risk was worth it. But now they did not need to go out of the grassland to plunder others. They could also receive good treatment. This was equivalent to having benefits in front of them. How many people would not be tempted? How many people would be able to ignore it? At this time, it was not only the ordinary Tatar cavalrymen. Some of the Tatar centurions and kiliarchs were also tempted. Zhou Xian had just said that an ordinary soldier's monthly salary was at least 10 taels of silver. As a small general, they would receive even more. If they followed this treatment and worked in the mercenary army for a few years, wouldn't they have enough money to marry a wife, build a house and buy sheep and horses? If they really had money and a happy and comfortable life, who would want to go to war and take risks? Zhou Xian's appearance made many people have a better understanding of the mercenary army and yearn for it. In the following time, more Tatar cavalrymen like Zhou Xian who had been treated with minor injuries were released. They came to the center of the two armies and began to help spread the benefits of the mercenary army. One person's words might not be credible, but what about 10 people, 100 people or more? Not to mention that the original words were true, with so many people saying the same thing. Even if it was false, it would become true. As more and more of their original companions came forward to speak, gradually no one doubted the truth of the matter. On the contrary, everyone's eyes were full of stars, imagining the various benefits after joining the mercenary army. Zhou Xian and the others were sent out because they had received a certain promise from the mercenary army. For example, the so-called Mercenary Logistics Battalion commander Beta Persei, who was in charge of receiving them, said that as long as they helped persuade the Tatar cavalrymen, once they chose to surrender, not only would they receive a reward of 100 taels of silver for their military service, but after their injuries were healed, their ability would be tested first and they would be able to enter the corps. Even if it was for themselves, Zhou Xian and the others would go all out and do their best to praise the mercenary army to the best of their ability. Their efforts finally paid off. Under the extreme temptation of words, finally a bold Tatar cavalryman walked out of the camp and came to the center of the two armies, expressing his willingness to surrender to the mercenary army. His appearance was naturally welcomed by Zhou Xian and the others. In the warm applause, the mercenary army also sent out 2 battalions of soldiers to welcome him. Immediately, a special person came forward to register. The officer in charge of the reception also praised the Tatar cavalryman for daring to be the first to come forward. He said that if this person performed well, he would be given more consideration for his promotion. With such a living example in front of them, the other Tatar cavalrymen finally couldn't help but take the initiative to stand out. They scrambled to be the first, as if they were afraid that all the benefits would be taken away by others if they were late. More and more Tatar cavalrymen chose to surrender. They put down their weapons, jumped off their horses and joined the mercenary army. Because of this, the tension of the previous war slowly disappeared. So much so that the originally tense string was also relaxed. There were also examples of centurions and kiliarchs joining the mercenary army. In the main camp of the Tatar cavalry, Zhou Xian stood at the entrance of the large tent. He looked at everything that was happening in front of him from afar and was speechless for a long time. There was no expression on his face. He couldn't tell if he was happy or disappointed. Zhou Xi's mood was indeed a bit complicated. You could say that he was happy. So many of his brothers had a way to live, so he was naturally happy. But at the same time he was worried that the mercenary army would not treat his brothers well. Since they had surrendered, it was the same as fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. If all of this was fake, then what should he do? Under such a worried mood, Zhou Xian, who had done his best to talk, crossed the line between the two armies and arrived in front of Zhou Xian. This was deliberately requested by Zhou Xian. He wanted to contact Zhou Xian alone and use his experience to judge whether what Zhou Xian said was true or false. Seeing that Zhou Xian had arrived, he calmly turned around and walked into the large tent. He spat out a sentence, "Come with me." Zhou Xian was naturally cautious and even a little nervous. After all, he was just an ordinary Tatar cavalryman. It was impossible for him to meet a general like Zhou Xian who commanded tens of thousands of troops. But now they could actually meet alone. It was imaginable how his mentality had changed. As soon as he entered the tent, it was incomparably cold. Zhou Xian turned his head and said casually, "Sit anywhere." "Thank you, General. I'm used to standing." Zhou Xian was still very aware of his identity. He didn't sit down but stood respectfully at the side. Zhou Xian saw Zhou Xian's performance, but he didn't say anything. Instead he sat down and asked casually, "Tell me everything you saw after going to the mercenary camp and the benefits they promised you. Remember, don't lie. If I find out, you'll never be able to walk out of this tent." There wasn't the slightest anger in his voice, and there wasn't even the slightest murderous intent. However, these words brought a lot of pressure to Zhou Xian, so much so that he suddenly broke out in cold sweat. It also gave him a feeling that it was best not to lie in front of General Su He. Otherwise he would definitely lose his life here. Chapter 721. Yes, General, I will report truthfully. Zhou Xian said very sincerely, then he recounted everything that happened when he entered the mercenary camp in detail. He even told Beta Persei about the things that he promised him. General, I didn't say a single lie. Everything I said is true. I also saw our mercenary Tatar soldiers in the previous battle in the barracks. Most of them were treated well. Although they were locked in military tents, they were not beaten, scolded, or reprimanded. They even had a fixed time to come out every day. And once some of them were willing to surrender, they would immediately be separated and receive better treatment. Even those soldiers who did not make a choice for the time being would be able to eat their fill for 3 meals and would not go hungry. Su He nodded from time to time as he listened carefully to Zhou Xian's detailed account of everything he saw. He could feel that Zhou Xian was not lying. He had interrupted several times and then asked the previous questions again. The answers he got were the same. There was no difference. He learned more about the mercenary army from Zhou Xian's mouth. He also knew that his soldiers were doing well. He could finally rest assured. He slowly closed his eyes, then waved his hand and said, "Very good, thank you for telling me so much. You can leave now." Zhou Xian, who could leave, did not immediately move. Instead, he took the initiative to say after struggling in his heart, "General, don't you choose to join the mercenary army? They are indeed treated well, and their mental outlook is not worse than our Tatar cavalry." He don't say any more. Otherwise, you will only force me to change my mind about not killing you. You can leave now. Although he did not say anything more, Su He had already expressed his determination with practical actions. That is, others can surrender but he will not. No matter what, he was a general who once commanded tens of thousands of cavalry. How could he choose to surrender in exchange for a new life? At this point, Su He was about to get angry. By right, this should be the time for Zhou Xian to leave. However, he still didn't move. Instead, after a moment of hesitation, he suddenly said, "General, the mercenaries hope to see you join them. They even promised you the opportunity to lead an army alone after you join them. He also said that if you don't go, young Master Haral Yuo's life will be in danger." Listening to Zhou Xian's noisy words, Su He was about to get angry. Was his expression not clear and specific enough? Why was the other party still trying to persuade him? He had to show the other party some power. Just as he was about to punish Zhou Xian, he suddenly heard the last sentence. When he heard Hararo's name, his originally closed eyes suddenly opened. "What did you say? If Harak is still alive, how is he now?" Su He finally reacted, which made Zhou Xian breathe a sigh of relief. Before coming, Beta Persei told him that if possible he could help persuade Su He. For this he even wrote him a letter. But Beta Persei also said that this mission could be abandoned. After all, it was too dangerous. No one would blame him if he didn't complete it. Of course, if he completed it well, there would be additional rewards and so on. On the way to see Su He, Zhou Xian thought a lot. In the end, he decided to give it a try. This was not only because of the generous rewards, but also because of a more important reason. He respected General Su He very much and didn't want to see the general die because he didn't surrender. So he finally mustered up the courage to give it a try. Now it seems that he finally made the right bet. Zhou Xian happily took out the letter from his arms and handed it to Su He. "General, this is a letter from the mercenary general. There should be the answer you want in it. Take a look." Su He didn't hesitate to take the letter, then opened it and read it. He finally knew what happened at Xihe in the North Slope. It was as he expected and guessed. Whether it was the 5,000 Tatar cavalry at Xihe or the 10,000 Tatar cavalry at the North Slope, they were all defeated. The defeat was very thorough. General Gulang, who was in charge of the North Slope, was killed in the chaos. Harak, who led the 5,000 Xihe cavalry, was lucky and was captured alive. Now he was in the hands of the mercenaries who originally wanted to kill him. But if Su He was willing to surrender, this person would not die. This was the promise of the mercenary leader, the great Ming dynasty's loyalty and courage. It also expressed the other party's importance to him. At the end of the letter, there was also Yang Qindong's handwriting. "General Su He, I have long heard of your ability to command troops. I look forward to it. If you are willing to return, you will be put in an important position. The great Ming dynasty's loyalty and courage is a great promise. Just this line of words in Suhi's eyes was as heavy as 10,000 kilograms. It made Suhi feel touched. The fact that the other party was trying so hard to subdue him made him feel a little happy in his heart. A good bird chooses a good tree to nest in. Any capable person would want to find a wise master. Only in this way would they not bury their talents. Suhi also had a great dream in his heart. That was to rule the entire grassland like his predecessor, the greatest hero in his heart, Genghis Khan. Then he would let the Mongolian cavalry conquer the world and achieve supreme hegemony. Unfortunately, this dream was completely lost because he followed Agha-Dorji. This was a greedy person, a short-sighted person. As long as he could eat his fill, wear warm clothes and have enough power, he would stop moving forward. If he followed such a person, he might be able to barely survive, but it was obviously impossible to achieve great things. If the other party did not promote him and put him in an important position, Suhi would have left long ago. He originally thought that he would not have the chance to fulfill his wish in this life, but now the opportunity was in front of him again. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage, the legendary war god who could easily defeat Xian, had extended an olive branch to him. How could he not be excited? But sometimes being excited was not enough. What really moved Suhi was that as long as he chose to surrender, he could save Ruoxian's life. This hit his heart, making him enter into a situation where he had no choice. Without Agha-Dorji's attention and promotion, Suhi would not be where he was today. In order to repay the favor, he risked his life to let the other party leave. Logically speaking, he had already repaid the favor. But this didn't seem to be enough. He didn't just want to call it even, he also wanted the other party to owe him a favor. This way, no matter who talked about this matter in the future, they wouldn't blame him anymore. And if he could save Ruoxian, it would be equivalent to making Agha-Dorji owe him a big favor. That would be perfect. Is Ruoxian still alive? I want to see him before making a decision. Although Suhi was already moved, he did not show it. Instead, he said very calmly, "Yes, I will pass on the general's request to the mercenary general. You just have to wait for the news." Zhou Xian naturally could not make any promises. He also did not have the authority to do so. All he could do was to pass on the original words. "Okay, I will give us 2 days. If we still do not see Ruoxian in 2 days, then you are deceiving me. At that time, even if I have to risk my life, I will fight you to the end." Suhi's voice became cold, releasing a murderous aura. Yes. Zhou Xian was affected. After hurriedly agreeing, he left the tent. Not long after, this news was passed back to the mercenary camp. Regarding Suhi's request, the officers below had different opinions. Someone suggested that Ruoxian could not be handed over. This person had previously had unfavorable thoughts towards the 6th young master and even fought a big battle at the short stone pile. He was also Agha-Dorji's only son. This person could not be let go and should be killed. Moreover, the other party was not surrounded. The news said that at least 6,000 Tatar cavalry had escaped. It was hard to guarantee that they would not become a threat in the future. As soon as this idea was put forward, it received a lot of support. Everyone thought that it was not worth it to let go of Ruoxian for the sake of Suhi, a loser. With so many people supporting this idea, the voices of quarreling in the tent quickly disappeared. After reaching a consensus, everyone's eyes fell on Yang Chendong, who had been sitting at the head of the tent without speaking. 8,000 soldiers are easy to obtain, but a general is difficult to find. You must have all heard of it. With a smile on his face, Yang Chendong's eyes swept across the faces of the officers in the tent. Suhi's ability is obvious to all of you. Let me ask everyone a question. In front of the mercenaries, if you were to command the Tatar cavalry, can you guarantee that you would do better than Suhi? Yang Chendong didn't go to talk about any great principles. Instead, he used facts to speak. Just a question was thrown out, and the tent immediately became silent. They asked themselves unless they knew all of the 6th young master's plans, and if they worked together they might have a chance of winning. Otherwise, they would not be able to win this battle. It could be said that the moment the Tatar cavalry became enemies with the mercenaries, they had already lost. Haha, I know that many of you look down on the general of a defeated army. But what I want to say is that defeat is not the fault of the general. Whoever commands this army will have the same result. So why should you look down on Suhi? As for defeats, most of you have experienced them before, right? When have I ever looked at you in a different light? When this question was asked, many of the faces in the tent became red. This was especially true for Yella and Lu Dai, who were the commander of the Jurchen cavalry division. Their faces were flushed red. Weren't they the general of a defeated army? It was because of their ability that they were chosen by Yang Qindong and placed in an important position. Chapter 722. Even if he was such a person, what qualifications did he have to look down on others? Everyone stopped talking. Yang Qindong smiled and said, "As for Haraluo, a dead person has no value. If we can use a person who is already dead in our eyes in exchange for Suhi's sincere surrender, it is worth it. Don't you think so?" This time no one said anything. This was not only because Yang Qindong's prestige was too high, to the point that his words carried enormous weight. More importantly, what he said was indeed very reasonable, making it difficult for everyone to find a place to refute. Because Yang Qindong expressed his opinion, the matter was settled. He immediately let the scouts return to the first city and bring Haraluo to the battlefield. Yang Qindong also made the decision to go to the Tatar cavalry army to see Suhi personally. Naturally, some people showed concerns about this decision, but Yang Qindong said that he had confidence in the Black Knights. In addition, the mercenaries could press to the front line. Once they found that the situation was not right, they could immediately launch a general attack. Finally, the other officers could not say anything. The scout left quickly and returned quickly as well. After only a day and a half, Haraluo was brought in front of Yang Qindong. Compared to the last time they met, this person was slightly embarrassed. It should be because he had not washed his face for a few days. He gave people the feeling that he was very listless. "Come, fetch water for him to wash his face and get him a set of clean clothes to change into." Yang Qindong just casually glanced at Haraluo, then looked away. If such a small person was not still useful now, perhaps he would not take a second look at him in his life. Haraluo was taken away. When he followed Yang Qindong and the 100 or so black-clad knights out of the mercenary camp, it was as if he had changed into a different person. He was much more energetic. Although his appearance had recovered a lot, it could still be seen from his constantly moving eyes that he was still very afraid at this moment. After becoming a captive, he no longer knew what his future path was. He didn't even know when he would die. Under this shadow, he didn't dare to say anything. Once he noticed that the surrounding black-clad soldiers were looking at him, he tried his best to put on a flattering smile to curry favor. To Haraluo's horror, he was surprised to find that after leaving the mercenary camp, they were actually heading towards the Tatar army. He carefully looked at the Black Knights beside him. There were only a little more than 100 of them. He really couldn't understand. Would such a small number of people really dare to bring him to the Tatar cavalry's camp? Could this be the so-called boldness of the skilled? While thinking, Yang Qindong led more than 100 Black Knights through the ceasefire battlefield, heading straight for the Tatar camp. Along the way, they saw many Tatar cavalry who were hesitating whether to surrender or not. When they saw Yang Qindong and the 100 Black Knights, their eyes were also filled with shock and confusion. In front of the largest tent in the Tatar cavalry's camp, Suhi stood to welcome them. When he saw the Black Knights coming from afar and Haraluo in the group, his face didn't change, but his heart was really shocked. The mercenaries really did send Haraluo over. They really kept their word. "Everyone, since you are here, why don't you take a seat in the main tent?" In the spirit of hospitality and also wanting to test the other party, Suhi made an invitation. Of course, he also wanted to test them. He wanted to see if the mercenaries were really so bold and if they had the courage to do so. Of course. The one who answered him was Yang Qindong, riding the white dragon horse at the head of the group. Along the way, he didn't panic as if he was walking in his own camp. He didn't show the slightest sign of weakness. On the contrary, when he came in front of Suhi, his eyes were still constantly looking at this person as if he was looking at a treasure. Yang Qindong, who agreed, dismounted from his horse and led Beta Persei and Chiovi, as well as Ba Daojiang and Ping Yu, who were escorting Haraluo, and strode into the tent. As soon as they entered the tent, they could see that both sides of the tent were filled with executioners holding swords and sabers. There were about 50 of them. They were glaring angrily at Yang Qindong and the others who came in. It was as if they would chop the intruders into minced meat at the slightest command. You are cheating, how dare you? After Beta Persei and Chiovi saw the situation in front of them, they stood on the left and right respectively and pulled out their sabers. Their eyes were filled with anger and killing intent. On the other hand, Yang Qindong wasn't confused by the scene in front of him. Instead, he smiled and looked at Su He, who had already walked to the front and was 3 meters away from him. He asked, "Is this how you treat your guests?" At this time, Yang Qindong not only showed that he wasn't afraid, but in fact he really wasn't. Hilarion was still in his hands and hadn't been handed over to the other party yet. Just based on this, the other party didn't dare to act rashly. According to his analysis, the reason why they put on such a posture was just to scare him. While Yang Qindong was speaking, Badao Jiang and Ping Yu also tightened their grip on the sabers in their hands. The sabers were placed on Hilarion's neck. It seemed that this movement would draw blood, causing Hilarion to cry out in alarm. Su He, don't act rashly, don't act rashly. Instead of scaring the others, Su He scared his own people. There was a trace of disappointment in his eyes. Then he waved his hand and the 50 axemen took a step back in unison, maintaining a safe distance from Yang Qindong and the others. After expressing a certain amount of goodwill, Su He looked at Yang Qindong and asked, "Can you let them go now?" Logically speaking, the danger wasn't over yet. Letting them go now was equivalent to putting themselves in danger. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't agree so easily. However, Yang Qindong wasn't an ordinary person. 50 axemen wasn't a small number, but it wasn't a big deal in his eyes. The 4 men he brought with him could each fight against 10 men, and his own strength was unfathomable. Outside the tent, Dao Xiao was leading more than 100 Black Knights. It was impossible for them to fend off an army of 10,000, but it would not be a problem for them to fend them off for a while. Once chaos broke out here, the mercenaries outside would charge in. These were the reasons why he was so confident. Because of this, after hearing Su He's question, Yang Qindong smiled. "Of course we can let them go. I originally wanted to give them to you. Come, let young Master Hilarion go." Badao Jiang and Ping Yu were stunned for a moment. However, this was the 6th young master's order. Although the 2 of them were reluctant, they still put down their sabers and pushed Hilarion to Su He's side. This action also gave Su He a fright. What he said just now was just to test the waters. If the other party didn't let him go, he would definitely mock them and point out that the mercenaries were also as timid as mice. He could use this opportunity to suppress the other party's momentum. But now the other party really let them go. Just this magnanimity and boldness made him speechless. Su He didn't know what to say. Hilarion, who was released, finally regained his freedom. He suddenly shouted, "General Su, quickly capture these people. Their status isn't low. We can threaten them to make the mercenaries pay the price." Along the way, although he didn't know Yang Qindong's true identity, he had met him twice. In addition, when he left the mercenaries' camp, he could see that many people looked at Yang Qindong with very respectful gazes. Just based on this, he guessed that this person's status wasn't ordinary. Thus he shouted loudly. At this moment, Hilarion's style of being an ingrate was incisively and vividly displayed. These words also made the surrounding 50 executioners move. Just now the other party had hostages in their hands, so they didn't dare to act rashly. But now the enemy had nothing, so they didn't put him in their eyes. Hilarion's shout also made Beta Persei, Chiovi and the other 2 become very nervous. The 4 of them even involuntarily touched their waists. They all came with pistols. If the situation goes out of control, they will pull out their guns and kill. However, Yang Qindong still didn't panic. Instead, he looked at Su He and smiled as if to tell everyone that he was not an enemy but a friend. Su He was also one of the calmer people. At least he didn't shout, nor did he have the intention to order the arrest. Instead, he looked at Yang Qindong, his eyes full of curiosity. "But I don't know who you are?" Seeing Yang Qindong's calmness and also seeing that this person was the leader of the Black Knights, Su He was indeed interested. This person's boldness and courage were something he had never seen in his life. With this alone, this person was worthy of respect. "What? General Su, you really don't know who I am? Well, I will tell you, listen carefully. I am the Great Ming's loyal duke, the one you call the war god." With a smile still on his face, Yang Qindong revealed his identity word by word. Loyal duke? War god. The moment the name was said, not only Su He but also the 50 executioners involuntarily took a step back, their faces showing a look of horror. What was the meaning of a person's name, the shadow of a tree, was perfectly interpreted at this time. After a brief panic, everyone carefully looked at Yang Chendong. After all, it wasn't the first time they heard the name of the war god, but it was rumored that this person had 3 heads and 6 arms and was 3 feet tall. But now looking at him, he was the same as them but younger and more handsome. You are the war god? Suhi asked in disbelief. It's true. And when you go to the mercenary army in the future, you will naturally know that I am not lying. Yang Chendong said with a smile, almost patting his chest and taking out his ID card as proof. Chapter 723. Really was the war god. So he was truly excited. The true men of the grasslands all worshipped heroes. Without a doubt, the war god who could defeat the Walla's leader Xian naturally belonged to the category of heroes. In the past they had only heard of his name. Now that they had finally seen him in person, how could they not be excited? Not to mention the war god was now the commander of the mercenaries. He could even decide the life and death of many of them. Of course, what made Suhi even more excited was that this person actually came to her in person and he just wanted to recruit her. At that moment he felt that he was extremely valued. That feeling was very good and made him feel very comfortable. Haraoyuo was also frightened by the war god's name. But soon his eyes shone with excitement. This was the war god, someone who even Xian was afraid of. If he could capture this person and give him to Xian, he would definitely be able to exchange for a lot of good things. At that time, wouldn't he gain both fame and fortune? His faction would also have a great opportunity to develop. He would also be regarded as a hero by the grasslands warriors. Thinking about the various benefits he could obtain, Haraoyuo couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. He shouted at the executioners in the tent, "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and capture him. This is a great contribution." His voice was shouted out and the crowd of executioners were also moved. But no one moved. Instead they all looked at Suhi. Suhi was the commander here. They could only listen to his orders. Seeing that no one moved and instead looked at Suhi, Haraoyuo was unhappy. He said with a dark face, "Did you not hear what I said? Let me tell you, if you don't listen, I will hand you over to my father. At that time, even Suhi won't be able to protect you." Poor Haraoyuo, he still didn't know that his father had already escaped with 3,000 cavalry. He thought that no one could stop him from doing anything with his father's name. Haraoyuo had exposed his true face. This made Suhi very unhappy. The war god was willing to take the risk alone. This was a display of courage and wisdom, but how could it not be that he trusted himself? Although he also wanted to defeat the battle god, that would bring him both fame and fortune. However, if he wanted to defeat them, he would have to defeat them fair and square on the battlefield. He would not have to resort to petty tricks and use the other party's trust to make a move. If he did that, he would not be a hero. In fact, he would be worse than a coward. That's enough. Suddenly, Suhi roared and stopped Haraoyuo's shouting. He then cupped his fists and said to Yang Chendong, "So it's the battle god. Sorry for the disrespect." He. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with Suhi's performance. The fact that the other party didn't make a move was enough to prove that he was a straightforward and upright man. Such a person was always worthy of others' trust. He smiled and said, "It's fine. I've admired General Su's talent for a long time. How about it? You gave me the conditions to send Haraoyuo back. Not only did I send him back, but I also appeared here personally. Does this count as showing enough sincerity?" He took the opportunity to state his purpose. These words caused Suhi's face to turn red. If he had only wanted to test the sincerity of the mercenaries before, the other party's performance was too good. It was so good that he had nothing to say. As a man, once a promise is made, even 4 horses cannot go back on it. Suhi was moved by Yang Chendong's sincerity. He immediately cupped his fists and said, "Battle god, I, Suhi, am very difficult to convince others, but I truly submit to you. From now on, Suhi is willing to serve by your side. Please accept me." As he spoke, he knelt on the ground. Suhi finally lowered his head. "Ha, good. Yang Chendong was naturally overjoyed. He laughed and took a few steps forward. He came in front of Suhi and reached out to help him up. Then the monarch and minister looked at each other and smiled. Everything was understood without words. Suhi expressed his intention to surrender. This scared Hilaro. Instead of his overbearing attitude, he stood obediently at the side like a cat. When he noticed Yang Qindong's gaze, he even tried his best to squeeze out a smile. He didn't even think about how he wanted to kill Yang Qindong just now. Yang Qindong did not even spare him a second glance. Such a person was not worthy of his attention. Yang Qindong did not even spare him a second glance. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted Su He to join the mercenaries, this person would have died countless times. Yang Qindong could ignore Hilaro, but Su He couldn't. With the intention of returning the favor, he first glanced at Herlaku, then at Yang Qindong and said, "War God, this subordinate has a presumptuous request, but I don't know if I can say it." "There's no harm in saying it," Yang Qindong said very generously. "This subordinate wants to send Hilaro away. If other Tatar cavalry are willing to follow, please don't stop them. As for the rest, this subordinate will try my best to persuade them to work for the mercenaries. Please allow it." This was equivalent to the last condition. It was also Su He's end to some things. Since he had already done so many things, there was no harm in doing one more. Yang Qindong immediately nodded and said, "Okay, I promise you." "Thank you, War God." Su He's attitude was already very respectful. After he finally made his choice, he relaxed a lot. In front of the big tent, more than 100 black-clad cavalry rode on horses. They wore black iron masks so people couldn't see their expressions at all. However, a solemn murderous aura leaked out uncontrollably. The Tatar cavalry who wanted to watch could only watch from afar. Time passed by minute by minute. The sixth young master still hadn't come out. Fortunately, there were no sounds of fighting coming out of the big tent. But before there was a result, all the black-clad cavalry maintained their best state. They looked like they would pull out their swords and open fire once the order was given. In fact, they didn't just pull out their swords. Therefore, the black-clad cavalry carried a Type 95 on their back. Everyone's body was full of magazines. Even the quiver was full of grenades. This was just in case. Just when the tension was so high that a random sound could lead to a chaotic battle, the curtain of the big tent was finally lifted from the inside. Yang Qindong, wearing a red cloak, strode out. Beside Yang Qindong were Beta Persei Chiovi and the others. Compared to when he went in, there was one more person beside him, Su He. It could be seen that the other party intentionally stood behind Yang Qindong, and he even showed a very respectful look. After walking out, Yang Qindong first nodded lightly to Dao Xiao and the other guards to show that he was fine. Then he turned to look at Su He and said, "You may begin." "Yes." Su He cupped his fists and answered. Then he strode away from Yang Qindong's side and walked to a place about 10 meters away from the big tent. Then he jumped onto a warhorse and shouted from above, "Everyone pay attention. Gather here. This general has an important matter to announce." At this time, the Tatar camp had experienced a few battles. After sending away all the wounded and a portion of people who had chosen to surrender, there were still about 7,000 people in the camp. With so many people gathered together, the momentum was still very great. Fortunately, they were worthy of being called an elite army. Even when they gathered, they were very orderly. No one panicked. Everyone stood in an orderly manner, either close or far away. However, their eyes were all on Su He, waiting for the general's next order. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the camp was once again safe. There were already very few people who continued to walk around. Su He's shout finally rang out, and that resounding voice also reached the ears of every soldier. "I am Su He. I have already made the decision to surrender and join the mercenary army. Brothers, if you believe in me, then please join me for a brand new beginning." The crowd was silent at first, but then there was a deafening shout. It was clear that this decision was very popular with the soldiers. Many people were already moved, but because there were still many people who had not made a choice, they could not force themselves to stand out. Thus they endured it. Now that even the general had decided to surrender to the mercenary army, they finally had nothing to worry about. The shouts came one after another, and it took a while for them to gradually calm down. Su He's voice continued to ring out. "Young Master Haruo has already been sent back. If anyone is willing to follow young master, I will not stop or oppose. You can leave with him. Those who do not wish to join the mercenary army can also leave with young master first. When you feel that it is safe or the time is ripe, you can leave on your own. From now on, everyone will go their separate ways." However, if one day we meet on the battlefield, we will definitely not be lenient. I hope that everyone can understand, and I also hope that those who leave will take care of themselves. He had given everyone another choice. He had spoken very gently at the beginning, but at the end he had said such a sentence which was full of threat. When these words entered the ears of the army, it indeed caused the faces of those who had ulterior motives to tighten. They had no choice but to think about it. If they really left, where would they go in the future? Moreover, the strength of the mercenary army was so strong. If they were to become enemies, would they be able to win? To put it simply, would they have a chance to survive? Yang Chendong heard Su He's words and laughed in his heart. This person really did have some tricks up his sleeve. It was clearly a threat, but he used such a method to make it seem as if he was thinking for everyone. This was indeed a talent. At this point, Yang Chendong was no longer worried about the choice of the Tatar cavalry. With Su He, this powerful general, he would definitely be satisfied with the result. In order to not create pressure for the other party and be able to do things freely, Yang Chendong left with more than 100 black-armored cavalry. Chapter 724. Not long after Yang Chendong left, Har also left the Tatar camp. Nearly 1,000 Tatar cavalrymen left with him. About 200 of them had received Lord Agar Dorj's kindness, and they were following the young master to repay his kindness. As for the rest, they did not want to join the Han army, or they were simply tired of war. Su He kept his word and did not make things difficult for them. Instead, he allowed them to take their war horses and weapons and leave the camp. However, if one day these people could not continue and wanted to return, they would have to start all over again. A day later, Su He brought about 6,000 Tatar cavalrymen and joined the mercenary army. At this point, the battle had come to an end. After several bloody battles, 8,000 of the 45,000 Tatar cavalrymen were killed and nearly 20,000 were wounded. Nearly 7,000 managed to escape, and in the end, more than 10,000 were captured or surrendered. On the other hand, the mercenary army had about 2,500 people who died or were seriously injured and could not return to the army. There were still more than 2,000 lightly wounded soldiers left behind. This was a great victory for them, no matter how one looked at it. Yang Chendong did not go back on his word and allowed his 4 regiments to replenish the soldiers from the captives and surrendered soldiers. After this was done, he selected some elite soldiers from the remaining Tatar cavalrymen to form a new Tatar cavalry regiment. The regiment commander was Su He, and the number of soldiers was the same as the Nuzan cavalry regiment, 3,000. As for the remaining soldiers, they were incorporated into the newly expanded logistics regiment to replenish the soldiers. First city. News of the battle outside continued to pour into the city. The biggest change was that one could see captured Tatar cavalrymen and injured Tatar cavalrymen being sent into the city almost every day. Every time they appeared, the people in the city would talk about it. Although the citizens of the city weren't very sure about the number of mercenaries, they knew that there were about 10,000 to less than 20,000 mercenaries. Facing 45,000 elite Tatar cavalrymen with less than 20,000 people, many people were worried at the beginning. After all, the difference in strength was too great. Even if some people had seen the mercenaries' training methods, they still did not think that it would be easy for them to win. However, just as most people were not optimistic about their chances, reports of victory were sent into the city again and again. Under intentional propaganda, the more than 10,000 people in the city were clearly aware of the situation at the front lines, as well as how much the mercenaries had obtained in each battle. Seeing that they had won one battle after another, the people in the city were encouraged. They had more confidence in the mercenaries and were more determined to live in the city. Of course, there were 2 sides to everything. Some people were happy while others were unhappy. For example, some of the grassland youths in the city who wanted to join the mercenary army. They thought that if the front line was tight, they would have a chance to quickly rise and become a member of the mercenary army. However, news of victory kept coming in, especially when a large number of captives and wounded were sent into the city and passed through the streets in front of them. They couldn't help but start to worry. With so many captives, would the mercenaries choose to conscript? Would they still have a chance to join the army and create a better future? Amidst such worries, even better news came. Agar Dorj escaped and the Tatar army was defeated. General Su He finally chose to surrender and joined the mercenary army. The beginning city was safe. It was safe. When this news spread to the city, Many people went to the streets to celebrate. Only those ambitious young men who wanted to join the army were missing. They were afraid that they had no hope. After understanding the treatment of the mercenaries, the thing they yearned for the most was to join this army. At the same time, they could also earn a better tomorrow for themselves. After discussing, they gathered together and decided in private that when the god of war returned from the front line, they would jointly request to join the mercenary army and ask the god of war to give them an explanation and a chance. Because so many people gathered, such a matter could not be hidden from the members of the security bureau in the city. At first, they thought that something big was going to happen. However, after understanding the matter, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, they reported the matter to the director of the security bureau in the beginning city, who was also in charge of intelligence in the grassland, Feng Liang. Feng Liang was one of the old people in the security bureau. When it was first established, he was chosen by the director Yang San and transferred to his command. Facts also proved that Director Yang San's judgment of people was still very accurate. Feng Liang withstood strict training, and after becoming an official member, he performed well and completed several difficult jobs in succession. Finally, he became a marquis and the person in charge of the security bureau in the grassland. This time, the beginning city was newly built, so it naturally needed some elite soldiers to assist. Feng Liang came here again and was responsible for the intelligence and security work in the city. He had also spent a lot of time walking through the streets and alleys of the beginning city. He knew the situation and terrain of the city like the back of his hand. Under Feng Liang's efforts, the security bureau in the city was successfully established. Its members were scattered all over the city to ensure that no matter what happened, no one would be able to escape their eyes. This time, so many young and strong grassland men suddenly gathered together. How could they escape his eyes and ears? He hurriedly sent people to inquire about and understand the situation. In the end, he got such a result which made him feel like he did not know what to say. Logically speaking, it was a good thing that the young man wanted to join the army. At least it proved that the army was popular. This was what many forces and armies wanted to see. However, the mercenary army paid attention to the elite route of a strong army. The sixth young master personally said that he did not ask for the number of mercenaries. He only needed them to have enough combat power. Only in this way would the treatment of soldiers be higher, and they would be more flexible and mobile in the war. As a result, the pressure on the logistical support would also be much less. The route of a strong army had proven its feasibility with facts. Since the establishment of the mercenary army, which time did they not win with fewer people? It was also because of the small number of troops that they were more flexible and mobile when they fought the war. Feng Liang, who understood this policy very well, could understand the feelings of these young and strong grassland men. He could also feel the benefits of the sixth young master's policy. For a moment he was caught in a dilemma. Since he knew what the request of these young and strong men was, there was no need to let them meet the sixth young master. This kind of small matter could be solved by him. How about this? Choose a few representatives from these young men who want to join the army. I will meet them alone. After some consideration, Feng Liang came up with a solution. That was to use the militia to solve the problem at hand. This way they would not need to take up the quota and resources of the mercenary army. It should be the best of both worlds. All they needed to do was to pay a certain amount of silver every month. In order to build an intelligence network, the thing that the security bureau did not lack the least was silver. This amount of silver was still something they could solve. Feng Liang made a decision. He even imitated the model of establishing the militia and reserve in Xianxia city. This solution was indeed effective. After meeting the representatives in private, the two sides reached an agreement to allow these men to enter the ranks of the militia of the first city. As long as they had the opportunity to pass the assessment, they would be able to enter the regular frontline combat forces. Before that, what they needed to do was to be responsible for the security in the beginning city. Once they found any suspicious people, they could keep an eye on them. If necessary, they could inform the army in the city and cooperate with them to suppress the enemy. After doing this, not only could they get a reasonable name for law enforcement, but more importantly, they could also get some silver every month. It was tentatively set at 2 taels of silver every month. There would be an additional reward for meritorious service. 2 taels of silver was naturally nothing in front of the regular mercenary army. However, for ordinary people it was already an income. At this moment, both sides were very satisfied. A gathering of people that needed to trouble Yang Chendong was declared over before it happened. What was even more unexpected was that it did not take long for these grassland men, who were persuaded by Feng Liang to join the militia, to really make a great contribution. Yang Chendong, who had safely returned to the city, did not know about everything that Feng Liang had done in private. However, these things would be formed into a secret document and sent to him for review. However, no one knew whether he would value it or not. For example, Yang Chendong did not pay attention to the matter reported by Feng Liang. Instead, he focused on the eastern area of the beginning city. The scouts had sent back news that the 3 divisions of the Lung Feng division were already on their way to transport the goods from Xichen city that had just been received from Sea Town. They would be able to rush back to the beginning city in at most 2 days. The previous battle was just to establish his prestige and to stabilize his foothold. Now it seemed that everything was going smoothly. After this battle, not only did he show his prestige, but he also strengthened the army. This also gave Yang Chendong more confidence. Whether it was to defend the city or to fight, he also had more choices. However, if one wanted to conquer a place, war was only one of the methods. Another important method was economic occupation. As long as one controlled the economy of a place, it was equivalent to controlling its artery. Only then would one's influence be more far-reaching and one would be more powerful. Among the goods transported by the 3 divisions of the Lung Feng division, there were many goods that were hard currencies. This was also a good opportunity to strengthen the economic strength of the beginning city again. This was also something that Yang Chendong valued very much. Therefore, on the morning of the 3rd day, when the 3 divisions of the Lung Feng division escorted more than 500 carriages and appeared outside the city, he personally went up to greet them. While thanking them for their hard work, he also listened to the work reports from Division Commander Wuxia and Political Commissar Chen Bo. Chapter 725. Ever since they left the first city and headed to the new Ergon city, they had openly raised the banner of the mercenary army. At the same time, they attracted the attention of the Baiming guards. Then, at the downstream of the Songhua River outside the Jianzhou left guard, they had a big battle with the 3,000 cavalrymen of the Baiming guards and won a great victory. They had made a great contribution in this battle, and because of this, they gained the name of the mercenary army. The Baiming guards became more honest, and a logistics route that belonged to the mercenary army was opened up. On the way back from Sea Town to pick up the goods, there were no more Ming army soldiers to make things difficult for them. There were only some scouts following them from afar, inquiring about their situation. Good. Hearing that he had established his prestige with just one battle, Yang Chendong was naturally satisfied. The Ming army was mostly made up of Han people. This was his route. If he could avoid hurting them, it would be best not to hurt them. As long as the other party was honest, he did not mind creating a peaceful border for them. As for who wanted to attack the Han people, he would take care of it. Of course, if the Ming army was smart, things would naturally develop normally. If they wanted to make things difficult for the mercenaries, he would not introduce them to teach them a lesson. He would let them know who they could not afford to offend and who they could not have any ideas about. The 3 divisions of Lung Feng had returned. They escorted more than 500 carriages of various sizes and a large number of goods. Since these were things that Yang Chendong needed, Crimson City would naturally provide them with all their strength. There were food, drinks, clothes, and all kinds of things. It could be said that they had everything. Not only did they bring a lot of goods this time, it was enough to make the first city a commercial city on the grasslands. At the same time, there was also a talent who came with the army. His surname was Yu and his name was Mian. His father was the first city lord of Crimson City, Lord Yu Qian. Yu Mian had a reputation in history and his abilities were not ordinary. It was just that Yang Chendong did not appear, and in the end Yu Qian ended up being beheaded. As his son, it was natural that he would not have a good ending. Now things were different. Yu Qian was under the protection of Yang Chendong, and he had even handed over the management of such an important headquarters city to him. Naturally, his son would be able to do things much more smoothly. Yu Mian's arrival was not because his father, Yu Qian, wanted him to make his presence known. In fact, Yu Mian was already participating in the management of Crimson City. As the saying goes, one does not need to rely on one's own talents. Yu Qian was an upright gentleman. As long as he believed that something was right, he would not care about the opinions of others. Since his son was capable, Why couldn't he be put in an important position? Yu Mian, who already had an official position in Crimson City and had begun to participate in the management, was summoned to Origin City after being recommended. This was Yang Qindong's order. Such a large city always needed someone to manage it, especially when it was just built. Could be said that there were a lot of things to do. If the person who came was not capable, wouldn't it be a waste of his energy? Finding a suitable city lord was a problem that Yang Qindong had been thinking about. He handed the matter of the candidates to Crimson City and asked them to report it. Among them was Yu Mian's name. In the end, he became the person that Yang Qindong wanted. When he saw Yu Mian, it was at the Yang residence in Origin City. The largest residence in this city was Yang Qindong's residence. In the pavilion in the back garden, Yang Qindong met Yu Mian, who was in his early 30s. The reason why he chose this place was to show his closeness. Only those who were chosen by Yang Qindong would be able to appear in such a private occasion. On the other hand, if it was someone unfamiliar, they could only meet in the living room. Yu Mian greets the sixth young master. After being brought to the back garden by Beta Persei, Yu Mian became excited when he saw the back of Yang Qindong, who was drinking tea alone from afar. He was still far away, but he had already bowed respectfully. "Ha, come have a seat." Yang Qindong laughed without even turning his head. Then he waved his hand and greeted Yu Mian casually. The more casual he was with you, the more he expressed his trust in you. Yu Mian naturally walked to Yang Qindong's side with a look of fear and trepidation. Then he nervously and carefully sat on the empty chair opposite him. One shouldn't think that Yu Mian's performance was exaggerated. But for those who lived in Crimson City, there was no one who didn't know Yang Qindong and the sixth young master. For example, Yu Qian was the first to be kidnapped, so he naturally had a conflict in his heart. Coupled with his feelings for the great Ming dynasty, it was basically impossible for him to work for other forces. Fortunately, Yang Qindong had never forced him. Otherwise, given Yu Qian's unyielding character, it would not be strange for him to commit suicide. He seemed to know what kind of person Yu Qian was, what kind of nature he had, and what kind of character he had. From the beginning, Yang Qindong did not intend to use force. He just let Yu Qian wander around the city. Then, under the influence of what he saw and heard, the environment really changed Yu Qian's mind. When he saw that Yang Qindong really wanted to change the people's lives, enrich the country and strengthen the people, and even create a dynasty that was more powerful than the Great Ming dynasty, his thoughts also changed little by little. During the day, he walked on the streets and observed his surroundings. He felt the vitality in Crimson City and the sincere and brilliant smiles on the faces of the people. At night, he tossed and turned in bed, unable to fall asleep. He thought about what kind of impact the development of Crimson City would have on the Great Ming dynasty and whether the development of such a city would be good or bad. Rather than saying that Yu Qian was loyal to the emperor of the Great Ming dynasty, it was better to say that he was loyal to the people of the Great Ming dynasty. By the same logic, he would help whoever could give the people a better life. After observing for many days, he confirmed that the development of Crimson City was for the good of the people. It could let them live a better life, obtain more respect and obtain more fairness. He was surprised to find that this was not the life he wanted, the life and world he wanted, the life he had been pursuing all this time. In the end, reality defeated him and changed Yu Qian. He finally decided to use his own ability to do something for the city. Then he was appointed to an important position and became the lord of a city. Facts also proved that he was indeed capable. Not only in military matters but also in the people's lives. After he was given great power, his performance would only improve. Facts further proved that Yang Qindong was right to put Yu Qian in an important position. Under his guidance, Crimson City entered an era of rapid development. With Yang Qindong's help in various aspects, it quickly became the largest city in the Yang dynasty. It created countless wealth for the development of the entire Yang dynasty and laid a solid foundation. Yu Qian was contributing to the development of Crimson City. Of course, his family was duty-bound as well. At this time, Yu Mian also became an official and became a capable subordinate under his father. He was a capable assistant. His performance was also remarkable. In the end, he came to the first city and became the person personally appointed by Yang Qindong. At this time, Yu Mian sighed with emotion about his experience. He could also feel the great responsibility on his shoulders. He had even begun to outline the future development plan of the first city in his heart. He was thinking that he must build the first city into the second Crimson City and continue its glory. Compared to Yu Mian's nervousness and excitement, Yang Qindong was very calm. He did not talk about business right away. Instead, he casually asked about the matters in Crimson City, especially if the higher-ups and officials could fulfill their duties. Yu Mian, don't be nervous. Just say whatever you want to say. You also know that I'm not in Crimson City all year round, so I don't know much about it. And where there are people, there will be fights. I know this better than you. If you say that your father is the city lord, no one will object to what he says and does, then I don't believe it. With a smile on his face, Yang Qindong directly sealed off the path of retreat as if saying, I can see that your father is an honest man, so I hope that you're also an honest man. If there's anything you want to say, then say it to me. Originally, he wanted to sing praises for Crimson City, but suddenly after Yang Qindong said this, Yu Mian knew that he could hold back those words in his stomach. But at the same time, he was very happy that the sixth young master was so considerate of him. Such a person was worthy of others' loyalty. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he thought for a while before saying, Sixth young master, just as you said, there will be fights where there are people. The higher-ups in Crimson City are indeed not a tight group. There are some people who have doubts about my father's decisions. But all in all, this is just a difference in opinion and a desire for power. At least up to now, no one has caused any major trouble. After all, with sixth young master's reputation and the security bureau's people secretly watching, as well as the Special Inspector Bureau's Lord Shen Yu's guarantee on the surface, everything is still peaceful. Yu Mian was being careful and polite, and what he reported was all good news. However, Yang Qindong was not an ordinary person. He could still hear the hidden meaning in his words. Even if everything was peaceful now, it was unknown what would happen in the future. What's going on? Tell me the details. This time, Yang Qindong had already put away his smile, and his expression became much more serious. If he didn't do this, he was afraid that it wouldn't be enough to make Yu Mian tell the truth. It's fine. Yu Mian seemed to want to say something, but in the end he shut his mouth. And this had already angered Yang Qindong. Alright, you can rest for now. In a few days, there will be a carriage that will go to Sea Town to pick up supplies. You can go back to Crimson City with the carriage. After saying this, Yang Qindong slowly stood up. Since Yu Mian didn't want to tell him the truth, he would let him go back. There was no need for him to stay by his side if he couldn't confide in him, let alone hand over such an important city like the first city to him. Chapter 726. He actually asked him to go back. This was obviously a sign of anger. Yu Mian was frightened at this moment. When he came, many people's eyes were red with jealousy. His father had high hopes for him, hoping that he would be able to gain a foothold in the origin city and create a glory similar to the Crimson City. Even when he left, he patted his chest and almost made a military order. It could be said that his family had given him too much hope for his arrival. But now he was actually going to return empty-handed. One could imagine what would happen if he didn't do anything and went back with his tail between his legs. At that time, not to mention himself, even his father would be implicated. Then he would become the true sinner of the Yu family. The consequences would be unimaginable and unimaginable. Yu Mian waited for Yang Qindong to leave the pavilion. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly shouted, "Sixth young master, please wait a moment." Stopping in his tracks, Yang Qindong turned around. What is it? Do you have something to tell me? Yes. This time Yu Mian lowered his head. Regardless of whether he was willing or not, he had no choice now. Then speak. Yang Qindong's expression was calm. Yes, sixth young master. With the continuous development of Crimson City, there are indeed some people who have become restless and dissatisfied. The most representative of them is Yang Taizhu. This is not his real name. It is a name he changed after coming to Crimson City. His father thinks that this name is more resounding and is in line with our original intention of conquering the world with martial arts. And his father is Crimson City's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yang Xian. Since he had already spoken, there was no way out for Yu Mian. Thus, he revealed everything he knew about the situation. Yang Taizhu is a very decisive person. He also has some tricks up his sleeves. Relying on the fact that he is Minister Yang's son, he bullies the good and oppresses the good. Many people who have money and power without any background have been oppressed by him. Not only that, but he also secretly kept the new products produced by the factories in Crimson City, using the excuse that they were not up to standard for his personal use, and then sold them to foreign merchants at a cheaper price. Sixth young master, as you know, the quality of our Red Nest City's goods is excellent, and the variety of them is wonderful. The demand has always exceeded the supply, and as long as these goods are out of the sea, they can be sold for a good price on land. Because of this, the entire Yang family has become rich. Yang Taizhu used most of this money to establish connections. They used this money to bribe and rope in some officials of various levels in Crimson City, causing their network to grow larger and larger. I'm afraid that it won't be long before these people join forces. They will be able to restrict my father's orders. After saying these words, Yu Mian lowered his head. He knew that he had thrown a huge bomb today. Who knew how many people would be punished after this and how many heads would fall to the ground because of this? Yang Qindong had been listening quietly, and there was no change in his expression. But in fact, his heart was already overflowing with anger. Everything Yang Taizhu had done, in the words of future generations, was smuggling, and this was stealing from him. Then he used his money to bribe and collude with some officials. It could be imagined that in the long run, once the net was large enough and the energy was strong enough, the first one to be overthrown would be City Lord Yu Qian, who had faithfully carried out his orders. Perhaps it would be his turn next. To think that he was still fighting a bloody battle on the front lines, risking his life in order to seize more territory as quickly as possible, liberate more people, and accumulate more power and influence. But if the rear was unstable, wouldn't everything he was doing now be a wedding dress for others? If that was the case, he would instead become a puppet. Just the thought of it was laughable. Of course, Yang Qindong wouldn't believe Yu Mian's words. Who knew if Yu Mian, who appeared to be honest and considerate, spoke in such a way because he wanted to eliminate his dissidents? Besides, Crimson City was his base camp. There were too many of his trusted aides there. Would those people turn a blind eye to such a thing? With doubts in his heart, Yang Qindong returned to the pavilion and sat down. Tell me, Yang Taizhu is so lawless. Does no one from the Security Bureau care about him? Could it be that the Special Inspector Bureau is useless? And those people from the military, will they turn a blind eye to it? It was precisely because he had left behind these forces and manpower that Yang Qindong was extremely at ease with Crimson City. He didn't believe that some people and some things could be bribed with money. Couldn't they tell that once he was angered, it would be useless no matter how much money they took out? Yu Mian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at Yang Qindong with a troubled expression. Say what you have to say. Don't hesitate. Beta Persei, call Tiger's mane over. Yang Qindong stared intently at Yu Mian's face as he roared outside. Beta Persei left in a hurry, at a loss. Yang Qindong looked at Yu Mian and said, All right, there are no outsiders here now. Tell me everything you know. Even if you say something wrong, I won't blame you. Furthermore, the matter of you saying something wrong won't spread. Now that things had come to this, Yu Mian had no way out. At that moment, he seemed to have made a decision as he said, Yes, sixth young master. This is the situation. This Yang Taizhu is very capable. He first wooed one of Fifth Madam's personal maidservants, Lin Lin, and married her. This way he would have Fifth Madam's support. Then he joined forces with the director of Crimson City's Security Bureau, Chen Shuquan. The sixth young master definitely knows this person. This person doesn't speak much, but as his name suggests, he likes power very much. Can be said that he hit it off with Yang Taizhu. With the support of the Security Bureau, he naturally gets twice the result with half the effort. As for the Special Inspector Bureau, he definitely won't find trouble with Fifth Madam. My father once doubted it, but soon, Lin Lin personally appeared in the City Lord's office. After that, I heard from my father that Lin Lin said that the entire Crimson City belongs to the Yang family. The Yang family's madam only took some money from her family. Is there a need to inform outsiders and use outsiders to criticize her? There's no need to talk about the military. Now that there's a political department, Leng Song and Commander Gao Xiong are thinking of how to compete with them. How could he possibly intervene in the local affairs? Wouldn't that be handing over his weakness to others? Therefore they simply turn a blind eye. As for the other officials, they don't dare to interfere. With the idea that mortals suffer when immortals fight, they hide as much as they can. As long as these people don't provoke them, they will also turn a blind eye. Upon hearing Yu Mian's explanation, Yang Qindong widened his eyes. No one dares to interfere. Didn't the Luan family do anything? Luan Xiaoyu is my future sixth madam. Didn't she stand up? It could be heard that although this was a questioning voice, there was a hint of trembling in his voice. It was unknown if it was because of anger or disappointment. Sixth madam? Ever since you left Crimson City, Sixth madam led the publicity team to perform for the nearly 5 million Han people. She said that she wanted to change the views and mentality of these people as soon as possible, so she hasn't been in Crimson City. And these things have only happened in the past few months. Sixth madam doesn't know about it. Yu Mian knew that this was very likely related to a girl's future happiness and the future of a large family. Of course he had to explain it clearly. Upon hearing this, Yang Qindong's expression looked better. But soon he sneered. The Yang family's money is indeed used by the family. There's no need for outsiders to interfere, but the problem is that she's just a maidservant. What right does she have to represent Fifth Madam? For this matter, did Fifth Madam really show up? Yu Mian thought for a while and shook his head. Probably not. At least Fifth Madam didn't say anything to my father. Then this Lin Lin acted on her own accord. But Fifth Madam didn't use people to investigate. She's also responsible. Yang Qindong said. This was equivalent to settling the matter. He really didn't expect that such a thing would happen in Crimson City. If not for the fact that he happened to talk to Yu Mian today and discovered some clues, he was afraid that this matter would only get bigger and bigger and one day, it would become an unsolvable problem. It seems that some people are used to living a peaceful life. They have forgotten what it's like to lick blood on the blade. If that's the case, then don't blame me for being heartless. After speaking, Yang Qindong raised his hand and slammed down on the stone table in the pavilion. Boom! A thunderous sound suddenly rose. After Yang Qindong's anger soared to the sky and he used his qi, the stone table actually cracked and fell to the ground with a loud bang. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who had just entered the courtyard, saw this scene clearly. Young master. Both of them cried out in surprise and then ran over in big strides. After all, Yang Qindong was still made of flesh and blood. When he slammed down, his hand was bleeding. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei cried out in pain and shock. They hurriedly shouted outside and arranged for the military doctor to bandage the wound. At the same time, both of them looked at Yu Mian angrily. Don't blame Yu Mian. It has nothing to do with him. Since you're here, listen to what Yu Mian has to say. Tell me your thoughts later. Yang Qindong's voice was very calm. He then waved his hand and went to find the military doctor, including his wound. Yang Qindong didn't doubt Yu Mian's words because some things could be found out after an investigation. If he was lying, then even his father Yu Qian couldn't protect him for framing Fifth Madam. After leaving the courtyard and finding the military doctor, Yang Qindong returned to the backyard after bandaging his hand. He saw Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei standing there with flushed faces. Beside them was Yu Mian, who was trembling with fear. He lowered his head and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Chapter 727. Are you trying to scare Yu Mian? Let me tell you, this has nothing to do with him. He is the hero. Needless to say, Yang Qindong knew that the two of them must have gotten angry in front of Yu Mian. Otherwise they wouldn't be like this. This subordinate doesn't dare. Yu Mian did see Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei getting angry just now. It was as if they wanted to eat someone, which really gave him a fright. Alright Yu Mian, you don't have to be afraid. You have contributed to this matter. How about this? You go take a walk on the streets first and familiarize yourself with the situation in the beginning city. Then write a city management report for me to read. We'll talk about the construction of the beginning city when the time comes. You can go now. With a smile on his face, Yang Qindong said to Yu Mian with a pleasant expression. Yu Mian naturally nodded and agreed. He excused himself and resigned. After there was no one else around, Yang Qindong's expression turned cold again. Tell me, what do the two of you think? Kill all these sinners. Yes, not only do we have to kill them all, but we also have to hold a public trial to clarify their crimes. We have to let all the officials in the Crimson City know what the consequences of doing wrong are. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei expressed their opinions one after another. After listening to Yu Mian explain everything from the beginning to the end, they were really angry. They didn't expect that while they were fighting for their lives in front of them, the people behind them would be like this. They even felt that their efforts were not worth it. Yes, some people have to be killed. The public trial also has to be held, but the evidence still has to be found first. Crimson City can't be in chaos because of this. It has to develop normally and healthfully. Yang Qindong also said as if he had made a decision. Although Xianxia was developing rapidly now, in fact everything was based on Crimson City. For example, the two provinces of Vietnam and Laos, the development of the beginning city, the expansion of the army, and the improvement of combat power all required a lot of money as a foundation. With money it was naturally easier to do things. Without money it was not an exaggeration to say that it was difficult to do anything. For the development of Crimson City, Yang Qindong put in a lot of effort. Not only did he share the fruits of his labor, but he also increased the salaries of the officials to ensure that they could work without any worries. But now it seemed, the human heart could never be satisfied. He originally thought that everyone would be fine, but since there were still problems he had no choice but to change his strategy. And this was the result of these people asking for it. It seems that I have to rectify my work style. Check it out and immediately send a message to Yang San. Directly ask him what he does as the chief of security and whether he still wants to work. If he doesn't want to work anymore, arrange for him to go to Crimson City to farm. Don't say that I didn't take care of him. Give him 50 mu of land, which is enough for his family to retire now and in the future. Then send a message to Yang Wu, scold him and ask him to cooperate with Yang San's next work. Send a message to the first madam, ask her to lecture the fifth madam. Tell her that when I'm not around she has to take care of the maids under her. Send a message to Xin Yu, scold him as a person in his position he has to do his job. If he can't do it then he should just resign. Send a message to Luan Xiaoyu with her as the leader, let them carry out a rectification operation including the military. Yang Qindong issued a series of orders. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei's expressions also became extremely solemn. They knew that this time the sixth young master was really angry. He was so angry that he wanted to reshuffle the cards in Crimson City. The orders were issued one by one. The two of them were afraid of forgetting something, so they had already taken out a pen and paper and began to write it down. Not long after, the two of them turned around and went straight to the telegraph room. Could be imagined that there would be a lot of work to be done. After arranging everything, Yang Qindong became relaxed. He walked towards the military supplies that were delivered. This time there were a lot of commercial goods. He wanted to carry out commercial activities in the first city, so he also wanted to build a commercial street here. Reality told him that he couldn't put all his eggs in one basket. He still had to make multiple preparations. It would be best if the city below could be self-sufficient. In this way, even if there was a problem in one of the links, it would not affect the overall situation. In the following time, Yang Qindong found Yu Mian. The two of them began to walk through the streets and alleys to plan the future construction of the first city. At this time, several fast boats were heading towards Crimson City from the sea. In the cabin, Yang San, who had a fierce face, was among them. Ever since he received the telegram, he rushed to the nearby dock from the Great Ming Dynasty. Along the way he had a gloomy face. The fast boat that belonged to the security bureau had already been arranged. After he boarded the boat he went straight to Crimson City. The telegram was in Yang San's hands. He had already read it countless times. However, every time he read it his heart would ache. Especially when he saw that he was given 50 mu of land to retire in, he felt a burst of shame. With his indestructible brotherly relationship with Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, he sent several telegrams back and finally figured out what had happened. He also finally knew why the sixth young master was so angry. Qin Shuquan, you've caused me a lot of trouble. Next you'll never be able to make a comeback. Sitting in the cabin, Yang San said fiercely in his heart. The work of the security bureau had always been very effective. Because of this, he had received countless praises from the sixth young master. After a long time he was a little numb. He even had the idea that the work of the security bureau was very easy to do. No matter who was arranged to take up the post, there shouldn't be any problems. Yang San was careless, or rather he was blinded by victory. He really didn't think about it. The Security Bureau's achievements today were naturally inseparable from their efforts. However, the more important reason was that Yang Qindong had invested a lot of money in this. The money that the Security Bureau spent in a year alone was more than the annual national taxes of Beiming or Southern Ming. This was still referring to the current situation. The territory wasn't that big and there weren't many areas that needed to be controlled. As it continued to develop, this money would only be spent more and more. It was precisely with this money as a guarantee that the Security Bureau could get more information and information. It was hateful that Xianxia hadn't paid attention to this before, so when he used people again he didn't pay so much attention to the inspection. For example, Qin Shuquan was also one of the old people when the Security Bureau was first established. His actual ability was very ordinary. It was precisely because he had to be taken care of that he was arranged to be a director in Crimson City. After all, the situation there was the best. As long as he didn't take the initiative to look for trouble, not only was the work easy, it was also easy to achieve results. Yes, the results were out now. Even the sixth young master was alarmed and he was even scolded because of it. Just based on this he couldn't tolerate it. Xianxia would definitely not show mercy to this kind of person who spoiled the pot of soup with a piece of rat **t. After such a big incident, Xianxia was almost sent home to be a farmer. If this matter couldn't be resolved, he was afraid that this time he really wouldn't be able to report back. Has the Security Bureau's operation team set off? Xianxia thought about some of the things that he needed to do when he arrived at Crimson City and thought that he needed reliable people. He looked at Che Chao and asked. Che Chao was a supervisor under the Security Bureau. He was very capable, but because he was still too young and wasn't in the first batch to enter the Security Bureau, he didn't have enough qualifications. Therefore he had been staying by Xianxia's side to gain experience. This time he brought Che Chao over to solve Qin Shuquan's problem better and faster. At the same time he also wanted to take the opportunity to see if this person had the ability to succeed Yang Shuquan's position, and if there were any problems with his character. After Qin Shuquan's incident, Xianxia started to pay attention to the character of his subordinates. Reality had already proven that if a person was unreliable, the stronger their ability, the more likely they would become a black sheep. Xianxia would definitely not make the same mistake twice. Chief, the operation team has transferred 200 people over. They are all safe and reliable and they don't have any contact with each other. This time they were ordered to rush to Crimson City from various places and won't leak any information. It's just that when they enter Crimson City's pier, it might be a little troublesome. The person who spoke was Che Chao. He had delicate features and looked very young. Don't worry, when the time comes, you will stay at the pier and be in charge of receiving them. I will give you my token. Xianxia said without the slightest emotion in his eyes. This was also the appearance he often maintained in front of his subordinates. Perhaps only in this way people couldn't see his true thoughts. With Xianxia's token, entering the strictly guarded Crimson City's pier would naturally be incomparably smooth. Che Chao quickly agreed and then shut his mouth. Until now he still didn't know why he suddenly returned to Crimson City, but his intuition told him that there must be some secret mission because if there was a shortage of manpower, there was a Security Bureau branch in Crimson City, and there were quite a number of people there. However, not informing them seemed to indicate a lot of problems. After Xianxia asked these questions he fell back into a state of meditation. He was already planning his every move after entering Crimson City. This time he didn't want to rely on others. He wanted to personally investigate Qin Shuquan's problem. If everything was like what the sixth young master said in the telegram, he would solve it according to the family law and cut off this malignant tumor of the Security Bureau with his own hands. Crimson City. It was still incomparably bustling. Even when the sky was dark, the main streets were already brightly lit. In the Great Ming Dynasty, kerosene lamps were still used, and the palace ministers only used candles. Just this point alone was many times better than before. As the citizens of Crimson City, they were also the first to enjoy the benefits of modern electrical industry. Meanwhile, in a courtyard that was known as the Street of Light, some people were doing shady things. Chapter 728. In a secret room there were only 2 people sitting inside. There was tea and some snacks on the table. Brother Chen, this time Yumian went over there. Who knows what he might say? I have to say that you're still too careful. If you did as I said, you should just kill him. Wouldn't that solve the problem once and for all? A slender, handsome man with extremely thin lips took the lead to speak up. This person was Yang Taizhu. With a father like Zhou Xian and a good appearance, he was blessed by the heavens. It could be said that the heavens treated him well. As long as he behaved himself, he was destined to have a good life. Unfortunately, his ambition was too big, so big that it was beyond his ability. It was only a matter of time before he was destroyed. Sitting opposite Yang Taiju was an ordinary-looking man. Even if such a person walked on the street, he wouldn't attract anyone's attention because he looked too ordinary. His height was ordinary, his facial features were ordinary, and there was nothing special about him. Such a person was suitable for an organization like the Security Bureau. No matter what, he didn't stand out. He was Qin Shuquan, the director of the Security Bureau in Crimson City. No. Qin Shuquan spoke. Yu Mian absolutely can't be killed. Not to mention that his father is Yu Qian. If something happens to him, it's impossible that no one will come to investigate. When the higher-ups call for this person, if we do this, wouldn't that be exposing ourselves? Yang Taiju also knew that killing Yu Mian at this time was a little too far-fetched, but for some reason he had a faint worry in his heart. Ordinary people didn't dare to casually talk about him, but this person had a father who was more powerful than him. Once he saw that person, he really couldn't predict what he would say. "Sai, it's too late to say anything now. I hope he'll be honest and not talk nonsense." Although Yang Taiju was saying words of comfort, his face was still nervous. Qin Shuquan's ordinary face chuckled and said, "Brother Yang, you don't have to be too worried. Yu Mian isn't that stupid. Saying anything about us won't do him any good. Besides, he has no evidence of our crimes in his hands. Besides, although he has gone to the north, it is still unknown whether he will be able to see that person, or whether he will have the opportunity to meet him alone. Even if he dares to say anything, our Security Bureau will be the first to receive the news. At least until now, I haven't received any orders. You don't have to worry." "Yes. With Brother Qin here, I am naturally not worried." Yang Taiju chuckled. Then, as if he had thought of something, he asked, "By the way, Brother Qin, do you think the Security Bureau will secretly arrange for other people to come to Crimson City?" "I don't think so," Qin Shuquan said confidently. "The director has a good relationship with me. He won't suspect me easily. If he really has any thoughts, he should ask me first. Even if he sends someone to investigate, he should inform me. Even if you don't inform me, my men are watching the docks day and night. It will be as difficult as ascending to the heavens for anyone who wants to get to the docks without being noticed." Qin Shuquan was indeed very confident. He was equally confident in his relationship with Yang San. Logically speaking, he was right. If it was just an ordinary person who complained, Yang San would really inform him beforehand. After all, suspecting a subordinate for no reason would only make the other brothers bitterly disappointed. But he forgot one thing. It depended on who was the one who complained. What if it was Yang Qindong who gave the order? Then it wouldn't be a complaint, but 100% execution of the order. If Yang Qindong gave the order, Yang San would definitely attract great attention. Not only that, but he would also have to do a good job. Even if there was no problem, he must provide evidence. Under such circumstances, how could Yang San inform Qin Shuquan about it? At this moment, it could only be said that Qin Shuquan was too confident, so confident that he was a little arrogant. It was a pity that no matter if it was Qin Shuquan or Yang Taiju, they didn't think too much about it. They only thought that even though Yang Qindong was formidable, to the extent of having an incomparable status in the entire Yang faction, in all of Crimson City, a person was a person, he wasn't a god, how could he possibly care about everything? Furthermore, they didn't do anything to betray Xianxia. They were just using their power and status to earn more money. Was there anything wrong with that? Which dynasty, which family didn't use this opportunity to develop? What they did wasn't a big deal, so it wouldn't attract Yang Qindong's attention. Yu Mian's matter seemed to have come to an end here. Following that, the two of them talked about the Luan family. The Luan family was a special existence in the entire Crimson City. The Yang family only had a total of 4 people, but these 4 people all held high positions and held different positions and influence in different industries. Especially their daughter Luan Xiaoyu. When she reached the age, she would become the 6th madam. How could such a family not be illustrious? In Crimson City, anyone with ambition would have the idea of getting close to the other party. Because once they obtained the friendship of the other party, no matter what they did in the future, it would be twice the result with half the effort. Yang Taiju had been thinking about this recently. Considering the current situation of the Luan family, he was powerless against Luan Qi and Luan Qi's mother, Zhou Hua. These two had power and status and were busy with work every day. Outsiders simply didn't have the time to come into contact with them. As for his daughter Luan Xiaoyu, her identity meant that no one would dare to have any ideas about her. Even Yang Taizhu couldn't, and even his father Yang Shan didn't dare to touch her. After thinking about it, there was only one Luan Xiaoqian. This person was placed in an important position and had already become the governor of Lao province at a young age. His future was limitless. Most importantly, he had a fatal flaw, and that was that he was young and he still didn't have a wife. Although Luan Xiaoqian had already married 2 concubines in order to appease the hearts of the nobles in Lao Lao, and also in order to give birth to the Luan family, he didn't have a wife. In the eyes of others, that was the high and mighty position, and only then was he recognized by the outside world as a member of the Luan family. Currently, Yang Taizhu and Qin Shuquan were discussing the matter of finding a wife for Luan Xiaoyu. They had already thought about it. As long as this wife was one of their own, then if anything critical happened in the future, this person would play an absolutely crucial role. This was equivalent to not only establishing a relationship with the 5th madam, but also joining forces with the 6th madam's family. At that time, as long as the 2 pillow winds blew, and the one above loosened her mouth, even if there was a huge matter, it could be suppressed. We have to hurry up with the matter of finding someone. He's not young anymore, and finding a wife is only a matter of time. If it wasn't for that statement that the wife of a high-ranking official must be a Han, I'm afraid that there would already be arrangements and we wouldn't have a chance. Yang Taizhu thought about this matter and reminded Che Chao, who was sitting opposite him. Brother Yang, don't worry, I have already arranged for the security bureau to search the city. It's just that your requirements are a bit too high. You need to be young and beautiful, and you also need to have a clean background. The most important thing is that you listen to us. This kind of search is somewhat contradictory, so it dragged on for a few days. While Che Chao was complaining, Yang Tiezhu's eyes were already wide open. The person must be beautiful, otherwise Luan Xiaoqian might not be able to take a fancy to her. Her background must also be clean. Do you think that when the Luan family is looking for a wife, they won't let people investigate? As for listening to us, this is even more important. We won't be kind enough to make a wedding dress for others. The person we find must be helpful to us. Yang Taizhu didn't relent, and Qin Shuquan could only sigh and nod. Okay, I'll continue to arrange for people to search. By the way, the latest batch of goods should be out of the cabin. When will you give me a definite letter? I'll start to arrange it. Oh, it'll be soon. It'll be in 3 days at the new dock. I've already arranged everything that needs to be arranged. When the time comes, all you need to do is to send people from the security bureau to temporarily seal off the dock for 4 hours. Then everything will be ready. Qin Shuquan nodded when he heard this. That's easy, it's not the first time we've done such a thing. The two looked at each other at this moment and smiled. The so-called status and power were all transient, only the gold and silver in their hands were real. As long as they had money, where couldn't they be happy and carefree? The two were still secretly plotting here, and from time to time their laughter could be heard, which was a kind of imagination for the future. But what they didn't know was that while they were talking, the director of the security bureau, Yang San, had already arrived at the new dock on a fast boat without anyone noticing. He was stopped by the security bureau of the Crimson City, who were guarding here day and night. After Yang San led Che Chao and dozens of people off the fast boat, he took out the pass issued by the security bureau, and Leng Feng, who was guarding the dock, allowed them to pass according to the regulations. But soon, secret agents of the security bureau surrounded them. Wait, you said that you have a pass from the security bureau, but why haven't we heard about this? Take it out and let us have a look. 4 men dressed like commoners walked over. Then they looked at Yang San's group of dozens of people with arrogant looks on their faces. Who do you think you are? Che Chao stepped forward. For a small fry like this, there was no need for the director to come out personally. The people of the security bureau were used to doing whatever they wanted. Suddenly they saw someone who was more arrogant than them. The 4 of them looked at each other, then laughed. Yo, I didn't know that you're so brave. Do you know who we are? Let me tell you, have you heard of the security bureau? You actually want to enter the city under our banner, then you have to go through us first. Chapter 729. The leader had a smug look on his face. In fact, he was also one of Director Yang Shichuan's most valued subordinates, Dong Hui. Usually he was in charge of the entry and exit of the docks. When he said this, he intentionally glanced at Leng Feng, who was on duty. He was basically telling Che Chao and the others that if they didn't want to be captured by Leng Feng, they had to be more obedient. Usually he would scare others, but this time he was intimidated by Dong Hui's words. Che Chao smiled but didn't reply. He only turned his head to look at Director Yang San, obviously asking for instructions. Don't make a big deal out of it. Take them down first. Yang San's position meant that he was incomparably decisive when it came to doing things. He really wasn't in the mood to explain anything to a few small fries. As soon as Yang San spoke, the people around him immediately moved. They moved like lightning and restrained 3 of them. Only Dong Hui's skills were not bad. He actually dodged them. After jumping 3 meters away, he suddenly shouted at Leng Feng, who was on duty, "Come quickly, there's a spy here." As soon as he shouted, the Leng Feng over there moved. As elites, they had long been paying attention to what was happening here. The appearance of Yang San's group was already very eye-catching. It was difficult for dozens of men not to attract attention wherever they went. However, they had the security bureau's credentials. They belonged to 2 different departments, so they had no choice but to let them go. When they saw Dong Hui, who was also from the security bureau, stop them, they thought that it was indeed an internal matter of the security bureau, so they didn't care. However, Dong Hui's sudden shout made them feel that something was wrong, so they swarmed over. The entire squad of Leng Feng only had a few seconds to pull out their guns, then surrounded Yang San and the others. "Put your hands on your heads and squat down. Tell us your true identities or we'll shoot." The black muzzles were fixed on Yang San and the others. Che Chao first stood in front of Yang San, using his body as a human shield, then said, "We're all on the same side, don't misunderstand." "Who's on the same side as you? You keep saying that you're from the security bureau, but why didn't we receive any orders? You want to play the role of a spy from the security bureau? Your performance is still lacking." Dong Hui jumped out, accusing Che Chao and the others of having a problem with their identities. Che Chao's identity was known to many of the Leng Feng patrolling the area, who often appeared at the docks. Now that he said this, of course, everyone believed him and not Yang San and the others. Che Chao's group, Dong Hui's accusation, everyone had their own opinions. If this continued, the situation would only get worse. Seeing that the situation was about to get out of control, Yang San finally stood up and said, "All of you shut up." As Yang San spoke, he took out an officer's certificate and handed it to a Class 1 Sergeant, Leng Feng. "This is my certificate. It's enough to prove my identity. If you still don't believe me, send someone to the palace with this and find Yang Wu. He will verify everything." Leng of Leng Feng's Leng, the Leng's SSS its. Seeing that it was a green military ID, squad leader Leng Feng took it without any hesitation. He opened it and saw the words Yang San, Director of the Security Bureau, Senior Colonel written on it. The rank of colonel was also the highest in the mercenary army at that time. Other than Yang Chendong, the 1st Division Commander of the Army, Leng Song, and the 1st Division Commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, were only at the same rank. However, a senior colonel had appeared in front of him. Leng Feng's expression changed as he looked at Yang San. Speaking of which, if Yang San's military certificate showed that he was a major, or even a lieutenant colonel, it wouldn't have aroused Leng Feng's suspicions. However, the senior colonel was too eye-catching. It gave people a surreal feeling. If that's the case, I'll need to send someone to the palace with this document. I hope you can understand. Class Monitor Leng Feng didn't dare to make a decision at the moment, so he decided to do as the other party said. After all, he knew Yang Wu. Yang Wu would come to the docks to check on things when he had nothing to do. "Sure, but I have a request. No one here is allowed to leave. Also, what happened here must not be spread out before Yang Wu arrives." Yang San nodded. He could understand the other party's actions. They were also doing things according to the rules, but he wouldn't allow others to ruin his big plan. All right. Class Monitor Leng Feng was also very straightforward. After making a promise to Yang San, he sent the vice squad leader out and told him to ride a bicycle to the palace to see Yang Wu Yi. Leng Feng didn't speak to him. Instead, after looking at the document, his attitude changed greatly. In Dong Hui's eyes, all of this gave him a bad feeling. The other party claimed to be from the security bureau, but he had never seen them before. Moreover, judging from Leng Feng's attitude towards them, they seemed to be of a very high rank. Could it be that the other party was his superior? When he thought about how the security bureau mostly communicated through a single line, such a possibility existed, his expression became somewhat ugly. The mission that Director Chen Shuquan had given him was to watch here and not allow strangers to come ashore. If there were any, he had to report it. For the sake of his duty, he prepared to leave quietly. But just as he took a step forward, Yang San's voice rang out. You are very smart and know how to see the situation. It's just that you followed the wrong person. If you can turn over a new leaf, you can be considered a promising talent. He didn't think that his actions would be seen by others. At this moment, Dong Hui knew that he couldn't leave, so he could only turn his head and chuckle. Then he stood there and waited. He was following orders, and what he did was in accordance with the rules. There was really no need to be afraid of others. Both parties waited here. In less than an hour, the sound of bicycle bells rang out in the distance. Following that, Yang Wu led a group of Leng Feng and appeared here. Even though it was night and the lights at the pier weren't very bright, Yang San still recognized at a glance that this time, it wasn't only Yang Wu who came. The division commander of the army's 1st Division, Leng Song, also appeared with him. Yang Wu was naturally dressed casually, while Leng Song was indeed wearing a senior colonel's military uniform. The 2 bars and 4 fours were extremely dazzling under the light. Seeing that the division commander had arrived, the platoon commander at the pier immediately stood at attention and saluted. Leng Song stopped the bicycle and casually bowed to the soldiers of the Leng Feng. He strode over to Yang San with a smile on his face and said, Chief Yang, why didn't you say anything before coming? This is a surprise attack, isn't it? Seeing that not only did the division commander know Yang San, but his attitude was also so warm, the platoon commander at the side naturally retreated to the side. At this moment, Dong Hui's expression also turned ugly. It was obvious that he had made a mistake this time. It seemed that not only was the other party one of his men, but his position was also quite high. Yang San returned the military salute to Leng Song, but there was no smile on his face. After the salute, he said to Che Chao, Restrain these 4 people, I want to interrogate them later. After making some simple arrangements, Yang San looked at Leng Song and glanced at Yang Wu. He only said one sentence, Young master is very angry this time. With just one sentence, Yang Wu, who was incomparably famous in Crimson Nest City, who was called Yang Wu Yi, immediately lowered his head. Just one sentence was enough to show that the young master was dissatisfied with him. As one of the first 5 servants of the Yang family, they were different from the others. Others might have to rely on military merits to be promoted, but their status rose along with Xianxia's continuous growth. If one had to describe it, they were the same as the eunuchs by the emperor's side. They only needed to serve Yang Chendong well. Could be said that a single sentence determined their future in life. Now that the master was angry, it meant that Yang Wu didn't do his job well. Yang Wu felt very ashamed. Seeing Yang Wu lower his head, Yang San didn't say anything else. Instead, he looked at Leng Song and said, Young master is also very dissatisfied with your work. Crimson City is Xianxia's foundation, yet such a big thing happened. You didn't notice it, didn't report it, and didn't solve it. This time you lost points. Yes, I will reflect. Leng Song also lowered his head, looking like he had done something wrong and was very regretful. Logically speaking, with his position in the military, Leng Song was the 1st Regiment commander of the army, the 1st Division commander of the army. Other than Yang Chendong, very few people could suppress him, not even Yang San. However, the problem was that Yang San came as an imperial envoy to solve the problem. His position was completely different. He came as a representative of the 6th Young Master. What he said was also instructed by the 6th Young Master. Other than admitting his mistake, he could only cooperate. There is no use in reflecting. The young master wants to see results. I hope that you can redeem yourselves and cooperate with my work. If you can't even do this well, I can only report the truth to the young master. When the time comes, if your positions change, don't blame me. Yang San didn't want to have any deep contact with Leng Song. Although the other party was also in a high position, he was very clear about his own identity. He was a servant of the Yang family, one of the young master's people. He only served the young master and didn't need to care about other people's feelings. Moreover, as the head of the security bureau, if he had too much contact with important members of the military in the eyes of others, it was inevitable that they would have other thoughts. If that was the case, he couldn't imagine what the result would be. Yang San's official words fell into Leng Song's ears. He didn't even dare to have any thoughts of objecting. Yes, Leng Feng of the army will definitely cooperate. We will definitely cooperate. Very good. That was to lock up Leng Feng in this class first. It's not that they did anything wrong, but this is an important matter. We can't be careless in the slightest. My arrival is still a secret and definitely can't be spread. Understand? Yang San was satisfied with Leng Song's attitude. He took this opportunity to give his first order after coming ashore. Chapter 730. Understood. Leng Song nodded, then called over an adjutant beside him. He whispered a few words and someone immediately went to implement this matter. Just as Leng Song finished making the arrangements, Yang San spoke again. From today onwards, the dock will look the same as usual on the surface. But in fact, any personnel and goods entering or leaving the dock will need my permission to go out to sea. In order not to alert the enemy, you can make a move at sea. In short, the dock must be safe and sound. This matter will require Division Commander Leng's attention. As for the matters at sea, I will visit Division Commander Gao Xiong and explain it to him. Good. There are no problems on my side. I will personally arrange for people to guard here. Absolutely nothing will happen. Leng Song patted his chest and promised. Thank you for your hard work. Everyone, do what you are supposed to do. Later, write down everything you know about Yang Taizhu and Qin Shuquan on a piece of paper and have someone send it to me. I want to know more about them. Yang San's businesslike face gave off a huge psychological pressure. After saying this, Yang San turned and walked over to Dong Hui and the other three. After arranging the external affairs, it was time to deal with the internal affairs of the Security Bureau. At this time, Dong Hui was no longer as lively as before. Instead, he had a face full of respect and worship. From Che Chao's mouth, he finally knew who he was facing just now. He was actually the boss of the Security Bureau. This made him excited but also a little afraid. He was excited because he had worshipped the bureau chief for a long time. Now that he could finally see his idol at such a close distance, his heartbeat had already sped up countless times. He was afraid because he had stopped the other party and even almost made a move on him. He didn't know what kind of punishment he would receive for doing something wrong. With these feelings of apprehension, Dong Hui knelt on the ground with a plop the moment Yang San strode into the duty room at the side of the dock. At this moment he only had one thought, and that was to do his best to make up for what he had done wrong. Yang San boldly sat down on a chair in the duty room. He looked at Dong Hui, who was kneeling on the floor and didn't even dare to raise his head, and said, I heard that you are Qin Shuquan's trusted aide. Have you ever participated in his matters? He thought that the director would reprimand him for his actions just now, but he didn't expect that the director was talking about something else. After a moment of hesitation, Dong Hui immediately shook his head and said, I'm from the Security Bureau. Usually, I only come into contact with Director Chen for work matters, such as guarding the docks and keeping an eye on all suspicious people. As for Director Chen's private affairs, I have no right to participate, nor will I participate. With just a few words, Dong Hui had already made his position clear. That was, he was only Qin Shuquan's subordinate. The reason why he was chosen as Qin Shuquan's confidant was because of his ability. As for personal friendship, there was really nothing to it. This was also one of the rules of the Security Bureau. There was only work between superiors and subordinates, and there was no personal relationship between them. This way, it was possible to avoid any feelings between the two parties and make them emotional during work. When Yang San heard Dong Hui's words, he nodded in satisfaction. He was not worried that this person would dare to lie to him. The internal rules of the Security Bureau were very strict. If he deceived his superior, it would be difficult for him to die even if he wanted to. Moreover, there were some things that he only needed to send someone to investigate and he could come to a conclusion. Dong Hui should know this. In this way, Dong Hui should not be involved in Qin Shuquan's affairs much. From this point of view, this person could still be used. If he performed well, it was not impossible to put him in an important position in the future. He thought that Che Chao was going to replace Qin Shuquan's position, but he was a newcomer and couldn't sort out many relationships for a while. If he had the help of a local snake like Dong Hui, then the progress of the work would definitely speed up. Yang San had an idea in his mind. When he looked at Dong Hui, who was kneeling on the ground, he was no longer as cold and ruthless as before when he spoke. Dong Hui, I believe what you just said for the time being, but you should also know that if you lie to me, what will the consequences be? Yes, your subordinate knows, so your subordinate will never dare to lie to the director. Dong Hui hurriedly kowtowed to the ground. At this moment he just wanted to dig out his heart to show the director that he really didn't participate in some of Qin Shuquan's specific affairs. In fact, it was not that Dong Hui didn't want to, but that Qin Shuquan was being careful. Since it was a secret, of course, the fewer people who knew the better. Besides, once the matter was known by his subordinates, if one of them contacted the headquarters and reported the matter to the director, wouldn't he be shooting himself in the foot? Yang San also thought about this problem, so he initially ruled out the possibility that Dong Hui was involved in the smuggling incident. Even if the other party didn't have this motive and condition, Yang San could say something openly. Very well, I hope you haven't participated. If so, your opportunity to make a contribution will come. To tell you the truth, this time, the director came in person to solve some of Qin Shuquan's personal problems. If there is no accident, he can no longer be competent for the position of the director of the Crimson City Security Bureau. There are still a lot of things to do next, and even the entire Crimson City Security Bureau will undergo a big reshuffle. If you perform well, you can still stay and be entrusted with important tasks. As for where to go, you can make your own choice. What choice was there? One was heaven, the other was hell. Dong Hui didn't even want to think about it more. He immediately said, Director, please rest assured I will perform well and actively cooperate. Raise your head. Since he was going to continue to use Dong Hui, and in order not to alert the enemy and arouse Qin Shuquan's suspicion, Yang San decided to add more weight to Dong Hui and give him a good reminder. Hearing this, Dong Hui raised his head and saw Yang San glaring at him. Remember, if you dare to have any selfish motives or ruin things, I promise you that you will suffer a fate worse than death. Your family and relatives will suffer the same fate, understand? Understood, understood. Dong Hui was really frightened by this gaze, but after raising his head he immediately lowered it again, trembling all over. After convincing Dong Hui or putting enough pressure on him, Yang San walked out of the dock's duty room. He looked at Che Chao, who was guarding the door, and said, There shouldn't be any problems with this person, but you still need to send someone to check on him. If you're sure there's no problem, use him well. He should be one of your capable assistants in the future. Yes, Director, subordinate understands. Che Chao's expression didn't change, and then began to call people to investigate Dong Hui's situation. At the same time, he also wanted to interrogate the other 3 Security Bureau agents to get first-hand information. Yang San came to Crimson City. Although he was still discovered, he managed to salvage the situation in time. Furthermore, when he found Yang Wu, Leng Song happened to be there as well. With the help of the #1 person in the army, the matter of him arriving at the dock was suppressed. No one reported, and even the people guarding the dock were pressured by Yang San's power and chose to follow. As the director of Crimson City's Security Bureau, Qin Shuquan didn't know anything. He still did what he was supposed to do, preparing for another smuggling operation in 3 days. Yang Taizhu went to the palace more frequently these 2 days. Of course, with his status he could not enter the inner palace. He could only meet his wife Lin Lin, who he spent a lot of effort to catch up with, in the outer palace. He took the opportunity to get information from her, wanting to see if the palace was any different than usual. Since it was Yang Qindong's personal order, all the actions were naturally concealed. Not to mention that Lin Lin was only a servant girl that the 5th Madam fancied. Even the 5th Madam herself didn't know that Yang San came to Crimson City to investigate. After hugging Lin Lin tenderly for a while, Yang Taizhu left the palace with a satisfied face. He didn't find anything wrong, so he decided to do everything according to plan. He thought that after this matter was done he would have a large sum of money. In the long run, his Yang family would be rich enough to rival a country. At that time, even if there was a possibility of the matter being exposed, he would just leave Crimson City. After he had enough money, even if he formed a team, building a country wouldn't be a problem. Yang Taizhu was sometimes a little arrogant. Since Yang Qindong could do it from scratch, why couldn't he do it with so much money? Nobles, generals and ministers, it was better to have guts. Doing too much injustice leads to one's own destruction. This sentence was said by the ancients, and the truth also proved the authenticity and reliability of this sentence. 3 days later, when the time came to 9:30 p.m., when the docks began to return to silence, Director Chen Shuquan appeared on time. Just like the previous times when he smuggled goods, he still used the name of the Security Bureau, saying that he wanted to secretly transport a batch of goods out to sea. With this name, when he brought 60 to 70 carriages of goods all the way to the new docks, no one dared to check. The green light all the way let the goods be sent to the long-prepared cargo ship. While the goods were being loaded, Director Chen Shuquan took out a box of Aries brand cigarettes from his pocket. He took out a stick and put it in his mouth, then took out another stick and handed it to the head of the Security Bureau, Dong Hui. It had to be said that cigarettes could not only reduce stress and loneliness, but also play a strong role in communication. The cigarette was lit, and the relationship between Chen Shuquan and Dong Hui seemed to be a lot closer at this moment. Dong Hui, did anything happen at the docks during this time? When he said this, Chen Shuquan's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he could see through Dong Hui's heart. Chapter 731. Nothing happened. Everything is normal, Yi Zichen said. Dong Hui said with a smile, but his heart was beating like a drum. After all, Chen Shuquan was his superior and he really had no confidence in lying in front of his superior. Fortunately, he was very smart and did not dwell on this matter. Instead, he took the initiative to change the topic and asked, "Director, are these things to be given to the Security Bureau personnel outside the island?" "There are a lot of these things." Chen Shuquan, who was still smiling, immediately changed his expression and said seriously, "Have you forgotten the confidentiality rules? Don't ask what you shouldn't ask, don't say what you shouldn't say. How can you know these things with your status? Alright, you must be tired these days. Go home and have a good rest, there's no need for you here." The sudden coldness caused Dong Hui to pretend to be scared. He nodded his head repeatedly and then left. Looking at his back, Chen Shuquan's heart was already filled with killing intent. His subordinate was curious about this batch of goods. This was not a good sign, and it was best to kill the other party once and for all. Dong Hui did not know that Chen Shuquan had the intention to kill him. In fact, even if he knew, he would not be afraid. Right now, his backer was the bureau chief. As for now, since he was kicked out, of course, he had to inform the higher-ups of the news as soon as possible. This was a good opportunity to perform meritorious deeds. In order not to attract Chen Shuquan's attention, Che Chao did not place one of his own people at the dock. He only did 2 things. The first was to control the sea area outside the new dock in Crimson City, and the second was to wait for Dong Hui's news. One in and one out, both points were controlled. Che Chao firmly believed that unless Yang Taizhu and Chen Shuquan did not do anything, they would not be able to escape the big net he set up. But what he did not expect was that the other party would take the bait so quickly. When Dong Hui found Che Chao with sweat all over his forehead and said that their director Chen Shuquan sent dozens of carts of goods to the dock in the name of the Security Bureau, Che Chao also stood up from his chair excitedly. He often followed Bureau Chief Yang San, so he naturally knew that the Security Bureau did not inform him about the goods. In other words, tonight's action was completely decided by Chen Shuquan. Since that was the case, there was no doubt that the goods were smuggled. "Very good, Dong Hui. You've made a great contribution this time. How about this? I'll give you 50 elite brothers. You take them to capture the backbone of the city's Security Bureau. As long as they don't resist, don't kill them. If they resist, you can be heavy-handed. In short, do not allow any important personnel to escape or leave our sight. Do you understand?" Dong Hui had already used his actions to prove his position. At this moment, Che Chao could be considered to have completely trusted him. "Yes, please rest assured, Director Che. I'll get it done right away." Dong Hui was also a little excited. This was a heavy responsibility. From this moment on, not only would he be pulled out of the Chen Shuquan case, but he would also enter the list of meritorious people. Could be imagined that his future would be limitless. Che Chao quickly left with the 50 elites of the Security Bureau. Che Chao immediately got up and rushed to the place where Director Yang was resting. Not long after, a large net was spread out, and a series of plans on paper became the final practical action. Yang residence. Ever since Yang Shan was tricked by Yang Qindong, he was sent to Baiming from Nanming. After he was sent to Xi'an City, he was given a large residence. He was appointed as the Minister of Foreign Affairs to formulate foreign policies. Yang Shan had contributed greatly to the peaceful liberation of the First Shang dynasty. As a result, his words carried weight in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was said that a weak country had no diplomacy. Although Xi'an City didn't establish a country, it was better than one. Powerful military and economic capabilities made it easy for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to work with foreign countries. After establishing the two provinces of Vietnam and Laos, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs set up branches there respectively, and its status became even more extraordinary. In addition, Yang Shan and Xi'an City's mayor Yu Qian and the Special Inspector Bureau's director Xin Yu used to be officials in the same court. All of these made Yang Shan's position unshakable. As a result, the Yang family could be arrogant when they were outside as though they were superior to others. As the saying goes, a man whose heart is not content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Yang Shan, who was originally the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights in Nanming, was no longer the same as before. He should be reminiscing about the past. However, there were people who wouldn't forget their past hardships after gaining power. Instead, they believed that everything they had now was because of the hardships and tiredness they had suffered. This was the reward they deserved after putting in so much effort. When a person thought that everything he had was reasonable and deserved, his mentality would naturally change as a result. Yang Shan was the most typical example. With this kind of inflated mentality, the actions of his son Yang Taizhu seemed to be a matter of course. The Yang residence was brightly lit. Although it was already past 10 at night, most of the commoners were already asleep. However, it was still as bright as day in the Yang residence. All of this was because another batch of goods had left today. It wouldn't be long before countless taels of silver would be sent to them. With money and power, people would become inflated. Yang Taizhu was the most typical example. At this moment, he wasn't sleeping. Instead, he was very energetic and was playing a game of hide-and-seek with 4 young women. It was different from other people playing this game. If any of the 4 women were caught by Yang Taizhu, they would have to strip naked. This was what rich people did. What they did was to have fun. The 4 women were commoners who had spent money to trade with Nanming. They were originally good-looking, but because their living conditions weren't good, they became sallow and emaciated over time. However, the moment they were chosen by Yang Taizhu in the refugee camp, their lives had already changed. They ate well and wore warm clothes every day. All they needed to do was to become this man's plaything. When a poor person had problems even eating their fill, there was no need to talk about ideals and dignity. For a mouthful of food, the 4 women could only comply and allow Yang Taizhu to humiliate them. They were angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. Even though Yang Qindong had already stipulated that true Han people weren't allowed to buy and sell privately, and they weren't allowed to be forced or restricted. However, when they fell into Yang Taizhu's hands, how could they have the chance to redress their grievances? Not to mention, even if they wanted to sue, where would they find the right way to do so? In the face of the powerful Yang residence, an existence that could cover the sky with one hand, anyone could only accept their fate. Yang Taizhu was in a good mood. He was in the mood to play tonight. He was prepared to capture all 4 women and sleep with them. Thus, even though it was already late at night, he still didn't have the intention to rest. From time to time, the women's screams and Yang Taizhu's satisfied laughter could be heard in the residence. This wasn't the first time such a scene had appeared. The servants in the residence were almost used to it. In any case, as long as the young master was happy, he could do whatever he wanted as the master. How could they dare to interfere? Who could interfere? Dong 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 dong. Suddenly, a loud knocking sound broke this laughter. In the middle of the night in the Yang manor, it was very sudden and unexpected. Who is it? It's already the middle of the night, why are you knocking on the door? The gatekeeper sleepily got up and walked to the main entrance. He opened a small door, wanting to see who was so blind to disturb the Yang residents in the middle of the night. The moment the small door was opened, countless tall figures suddenly appeared in front of him. Then, without waiting for the gatekeeper to do anything or even open his mouth to cry out in alarm, those tall figures rushed in through the small door like fish in the sea. There was also a tall figure who immediately reached out and covered the door's mouth, blocking it completely, making it unable to make any sound. Ugh. The gatekeeper still wanted to struggle, but a clear voice rang in his ears. We are the Cold Vanguard warriors. We are going to search the Yang residence. This place is going to be over soon. You better cooperate. If you still dare to scream, even if we kill you in the next moment, it will be in vain. The people who came were indeed the Cold Vanguard warriors. Their mission was to surround the Yang residence and eliminate all security threats. The order even stated that if anyone resisted, they could use ruthless means to subdue them or even kill them. However, he was just a gatekeeper. They were all here to earn a living. The Cold Vanguard warriors did not really want to kill him. The gatekeeper finally became obedient. After all, when faced with a life-threatening situation, the so-called 1-month salary was nothing. The Cold Blade warriors walked past them and charged towards various parts of the Yang estate. Long before they came, they had already obtained the blueprint of the Yang mansion. After clearly understanding the situation inside, they could ensure that they could control all the vital points in the shortest amount of time, minimizing the possible resistance and threats that might exist in the Yang mansion to the greatest extent. As more and more Cold Vanguard warriors rushed into the Yang residence, the servants in the residence finally noticed them. Then there was a series of shouts and screams, causing the entire residence to become chaotic. It also startled Yang Taiju, who was still playing his game. Young master, this is bad. A lot of Cold Vanguard warriors suddenly appeared in the residence and surrounded us. Our armory has also been sealed by them. What should we do? A burly man who looked like a servant rushed into Yang Tieju's courtyard and saw that there were already 2 young ladies dressed in pure white clothes. However, he acted as if he did not see them and spoke with a panicked expression. Chapter 732. Yang Taiju, whose eyes were still covered by a black cloth, instinctively wanted to fly into a rage when he heard that someone had broken into his backyard. This was his private property, and usually no one was allowed to enter without orders. Otherwise, there would only be one result: death. Just as he was about to flare up, he suddenly froze when he heard that Leng Feng had barged into his residence. Then, with a wave of his right hand, he tore off the black cloth that was covering his eyes and asked with a ferocious look on his face. What happened? Before the servant could answer, more footsteps came from outside the door. Then a cold front officer wearing a military uniform with the insignia of a colonel on his shoulder appeared in the backyard. Behind him was a dense group of cold front soldiers with calm expressions and sharp eyes. Yang Taiju, who was about to angrily scold the intruder for intruding into his private residence, saw the intruder's face clearly. His original anger instantly disappeared and was replaced by a smile. Haha, so it's Regiment Commander Ting. Please forgive me for not welcoming you when you've come to visit. The intruder was Ting Shan, the 1st Regiment Commander of the Cold Front Army. Due to his seniority and fearlessness in battle, he was deeply trusted by Yang Chendong. Even in the entire Xichen city, there were not many people who could make him lower his head. Normally, even his father Yang Shan, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time, would show him some respect. Seeing that it was this person who appeared in his residence, although Yang Taiju was furious, he still didn't lose his temper. Ting Shan didn't immediately answer Yang Tieju's question. He only glanced behind Yang Taiju. When he saw that 2 of the 4 women were only wearing a thin layer of green gauze while the other 2 were already clean, he frowned slightly. The 4 of you should immediately find clothes and put them on. It's really immoral to be like this. The 4 ladies were already frightened by the Cold Blade warriors who rushed in. When they heard Ting Shan's words, it was as if they had heard the sound of nature. They hurriedly retreated to look for clothes, but before that they still looked at Yang Taiju with pleading eyes. This person was their master. If he didn't say anything, they wouldn't dare to act rashly. Even though their current clothes were very embarrassing and they had already abandoned their dignity, they still stood there foolishly after a long time of getting used to it. All right, go and put on your clothes. Yang Taiju forced a smile and said to the 4 women. Only then did the 4 beautiful figures quickly disappear. When Yang Taiju was left standing there alone, he said to Ting Shan in a fawning tone, Regiment Commander Ting, I don't know what made you so angry. If there's anything I can do for you, I will definitely do my best. How about this? It's really tiring for the brothers to carry out a mission so late at night. Why don't you all receive 10 silvers as compensation? Yang Taizhu said as he observed the changes in Ting Shan. He was not too flustered in his heart. Firstly, his background was deep enough. His father was in the residence and he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. His wife, Lin Lin, was also in the palace serving the fifth madam. She was his biggest trump card. If something happened to him, she would definitely not sit back and do nothing. Secondly, he was confident that no one could blackmail him. This was also why he was very confident in Chen Shuquan, the director of the Security Bureau. All along, the Security Bureau had been a unified system. Even the military had no right to question or investigate what they did in Crimson City. Of course, it was not that he did not think that something might have happened to Chen Shuquan, but he quickly denied it in his heart. Chen Shuquan was the director of the Security Bureau in Crimson City. He was the #1 existence. Who could investigate him? Who had the authority to investigate him? No matter what, even if something really happened to Chen Shuquan and he was investigated. What did that have to do with him? He was a good citizen. Although he had been working with Chen Shuquan, he did not leave any evidence. Even if something happened to the other party, there was no evidence to blame him. Not to mention, as long as something didn't happen immediately with his father and madam's relationship, after some interaction he would definitely be able to turn big things into small ones. Yang Taizhu was very confident. When he looked at Ting Shan, he was no longer as afraid as before. He even openly mentioned the matter of bribery. From this, it could be seen how bold he was. Hearing that Yang Taizhu wanted to give the Lung Feng soldiers money for their hard work, Ting Shan chuckled. 10 silvers for a soldier, young Master Yang is really generous. These words were said with a smile, so Yang Taizhu was unable to see the other party's true intentions. He could only smile apologetically and continue. It's nothing, it's nothing. The Lung Feng soldiers have sacrificed so much for the entire city and island. It's only right for me to contribute a little. It's only right. It's only right? Then I ask young Master Yang to cooperate with us again and make a trip with us. Ting Shan still had a smile on his face as he spoke. At the same time, he was disgusted by Yang Tiezhu's hypocrisy. Since he was able to enter the Yang residence in the middle of the night, he naturally received orders and knew the cause and effect of the matter. Although he did not know the details, his intuition told him that Yang Taizhu was finished this time. Even the Yang family would not be any better. Since that was the case, why should he be polite to a person who was destined to be finished? Seeing that Ting Shan suddenly turned hostile and wanted to take him away, Yang Tiezhu's face completely changed. What are you doing? What are you doing? Commander Ting, are you mistaken? I'm one of your own people. I'm also an officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What authority do you have to take me away? Do you know the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Relying on his father's relationship, Yang Taizhu had indeed obtained a position in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He was not in charge of anything. To put it bluntly, he was just in charge of an official position. Now this amulet had finally come into play. Seeing that Yang Taizhu did not cooperate and even used the name of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ting Shan did not show the slightest bit of surprise. Instead he smiled and said, "Young Master Yang, please cooperate with us. As for your identity as an officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we will give you a satisfactory answer very soon. Come, take him away." Ting Shan didn't want to waste any more time. After giving the order, 2 cold vanguard warriors with big waists walked out from behind him and rushed to Yang Tiezhu's front. They lowered their heads and gave Yang Taizhu a firm press. Yang Taizhu, whose body was restrained and head was pressed down, did not give up resisting. He still shouted with all his might, let me go, I'm an officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You can't do this to me, you can't." His shouts went from his courtyard to the main entrance of the Yang residence. Just as Ting Shan and the rest appeared here, a thunderous voice rang in their ears. "What are you doing?" Hearing this voice, Yang Taizhu, who was pressed down, seemed to have found his backbone. He raised his head abruptly and saw that the person who spoke was his father, Yang Shan. He immediately shouted, "Father, save me, father, save me. My son, don't worry. With your father here, no one can take you away from the residence. I have already arranged for someone to inform your wife. I believe she will not allow anyone to do this." Yang Shan's mountain-like voice rang out once again. At this moment he displayed sufficient calmness. Although Yang Shan did not participate in some of Yang Tieju's matters, it was impossible to say that he did not know anything. His son had done a lot of things under his name. He had more or less heard about it, but he did not interfere. Firstly, it was because he loved his son dearly. Secondly, his son would give him a lot of gold and silver every time. He used this to unite many officials and colleagues, which allowed him to do his work more easily. Not only did Yang Shan not feel ashamed of his son's actions, he even thought that this was a manifestation of his ability. After all, when he was an official in the Great Ming, who knew how many officials would take advantage of the situation to do things that crossed the line? When everyone did this, there was no need to criticize others. Therefore, he also thought that it was normal for the same thing to happen in Xichen City. Not to mention, his son was very scheming. Before doing anything, he first married the servant girl that the fifth madam had an important position in. This was equivalent to finding a strong ally and backer. His son was so careful in doing things, so he would only be more at ease. However, tonight Lung Feng suddenly entered the residence and indeed caught him off guard. However, he was not very frightened. Other than sending someone to inform Lin Lin, this daughter-in-law with a strong background, he only needed to stall for time. For him, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, this was not a big deal. After saying this confidently, Yang Shan looked at Ting Shan and said sternly, "Regiment Commander Ting, my son is an official in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's a cadre. He's an official who has been appointed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What happened to him should be investigated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so it is better not to trouble you." The Ministry of Foreign Affairs was clearly Yang Shan treated Yang Tieju's matter as an internal matter of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so it should be handled and solved by them. Yang Shan was confident, but he thought about it carefully. Since Ting Shan had appeared here, how could it be possible that he did not have anything to rely on? Facing Yang Shan, this high official, Ting Shan's tone was very calm, but he was also very calm. He said in a businesslike manner, "I'm sorry, Minister Yang. I received the order to take young Master Yang away. As for what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs wants to do, that is your business. Please do not affect my work. I'm also talking about work. I represent the Ministry of Foreign Affairs." Yang Shan did not have the slightest intention of backing down. He also shouted in a thunderous voice. It was really difficult for him. He was not young, but he seemed to be very confident. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.